overwhelming military offensive the world has ever seen. Nobody's seen anything like it. We have hit hundreds of targets in Iran, including Revolutionary Guard facilities, Iranian air defense systems. Just now, it was announced that we knocked out 9 ships plus their naval building, all in a matter of literally minutes. Iran's formerly supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead.
I spoke to you about the situation in the Gulf and explained that the United Kingdom was not involved in the strikes on Iran. That remains the case. The basis of our decision is the collective self-defence of long-standing friends and allies and protecting British lives. That is in accordance with international law, and we are publishing a summary of our legal advice. We are not joining these strikes, but we will continue with our defensive actions in the region.
Mr Farage, would a reform government have allowed US forces to use UK air bases for offensive operations in Iran?
Yes is the answer to your question. I would have said to the Americans, please do use our bases. We will be supportive of you on this.
There were a series of very loud blasts in the area of Dubai that I'm based in. That's in the marina area. It's a very touristy area, actually. Those blasts were the loudest we've heard yet, but equally we are reassured that they are most likely the sound of interception by the UAE's quite sophisticated THAAD interception kit. That is the Terminal High Altitude Area Defence System.
Across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning to you. Another dramatic news day. Headlines overnight as things escalate in the Middle East, more bombs raining down. Repatriation flights being sent to Oman to help British expats return home. Those deemed the most vulnerable will be prioritised. This is Alex Phillips here on Talk. I'm going to be with you for the next 3 hours to bring you all the latest from what is looking like a war that is escalating quite dramatically and quite quickly. What happens next? Is it going to come down to numbers? Is it going to come down to money? Is it going to come down to whether other people join the theatre of conflict? There is so much to talk about today. I'm pleased to say, delighted in fact, that I'm joined for the whole programme by the brilliant Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer. Well, I did say to Ted yesterday, if Big Phil's not in that seat, there's going to be a reckoning between us.
Why? Is there something going on?
I think there might be, and I think he might be the perfect person to help me
are we examining sort of sub-Saharan wheat prices compared to this year and what's happened over the last 10 years and the effect of climate change?
Exactly. That is 100% what we're doing. Net zero, the lot of it. Where do we begin? I mean, there is so much emerging all the time out of this. I suppose the big top line that's being carried across various newspapers today is the outburst by Donald Trump against UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, saying, well, it's quite clear, we're not dealing with Churchill here.
Yep.
What is your take on all of this? What is Starmer doing? Is he making the right decision? Is this perilous?
What is Starmer doing? I don't think anyone knows what Starmer's doing. I'm not a great Donald Trump supporter, but the sentiments of what he said are 100% accurate. There's the relationship that there is between the United States and the United Kingdom, and we talk about this special relationship. That's a special intelligence relationship. The political bit is what commentators put on top of it. But it is quite important. And whilst you may disagree with what your mate, your best mate for the whole of your life, who you've supported and they've supported you through everything, is going off and doing at that moment in time, but it doesn't stop you providing the support that they might need, and therefore you can whisper in their ear and say, hey, maybe you do it this way, you do it that way. Starmer's cutting that off, and he's cutting that off for no good reason whatsoever, because for reasons I can't talk, the UK will be directly and will have supported directly US actions into Iran before the bombing happened, and
by virtue of the fact that we share assets and we share networks, and it's a convoluted interconnection.
By virtue of the fact that we've been so closely linked for so many years, and we'll have known what's going on. So standing up in front of Parliament and saying I'm not giving direct support, he's wrong. And therefore, the use of our air bases...
He's lying.
He is lying. The use of our air bases, and yes, there are air bases, we own the geography and all the rest of it, but we've allowed the US to operate from there for many, many years, and including the Diego Garcia in the Chagos Islands. We know how critical that is to the United States. There's nothing to stop us turning around and saying, yes, you can use your bases for what it is that you're going to do. We understand your interpretation of international law, because it's your interpretation that you're using to do this. We disagree with that, so we're not going to directly support you with active military action in doing that, but hey, feel free to continue to use that. And by the way, if we think that you're overstepping the mark, we will come and tell you. We've lost the ability to do that by just saying no, and then he changes his mind, because British interests get British sovereign territory and British citizens get attacked at the sovereign base areas in Cyprus. He's flip-flopping left, right and centre over a thing that he shouldn't be doing. And why is he doing it? Because he's trying to balance off his domestic politics and keeping his Labour backbenchers on side after the disaster of the by-election, the upcoming disaster is going to be in the local elections, how many hundreds of U-turns as he had to do now on policies, right, because people turn around. He's trying to balance that off and stopping there being more reaction on his backbenchers, where little fiefdoms come together and start attacking him and destroy his government from the inside. But he's using international politics to do it. It's disgusting. It's the worst sort of leadership that you can get.
Well, talking about being called out for the worst sort of leadership, let's have a look at what Donald Trump had to say about Sir Keir Starmer.
But this is not the age of Churchill. I will say the UK has been very, very uncooperative with that stupid island that they have, that they gave away and took a 100-year lease, having to do with perhaps indigenous people claiming the island that never even saw the island before. What's that all about? They ruin relationships. It's a shame. It's and that country, UK, and I love that country. I love it. My mother was born there. I love it. The UK, what they're doing with energy and what they're doing with immigration is horrible. The energy is through the roof, the highest in the world. And the immigration is, I mean, look, you have places where in the UK, you have a terrible mayor of London, terrible. He's an incompetent guy. But you have Sharia courts. You don't have Sharia courts. You don't want Sharia courts. You have Sharia courts adjudicating law. So it's very simple. Immigration, very importantly, immigration and energy. And you bring it back. Otherwise, you're not going to bring it back.
Yeah, interesting remarks there. And actually, I want to put to one side right now the connection here between immigration and perhaps the decisions that Sir Keir Starmer has taken, because we've just had some latest breaking news. Wait for this one, Phil. Reports that HMS Dragon, due to head to Cyprus, won't be setting sail now until next week. For those of you listening on the radio, I called you Sir Philip then. I just knighted you on air. No, Philip Ingram has his head in his hands. You should be Sir Philip Ingram. Has his head in his hands and goodness. Is the king despairing. Why do you think that is? Just not ready, ill-equipped?
We haven't got the detail behind it, but there's been an abject failure at one level and possibly different levels. So what should be happening in this is military commanders and planners are sitting looking at what's going on around the world. This is part of what used to be called strategic command, looking at what's going on and go, things are happening down there. We might need to send a ship back in that direction. And what you then do is you reduce the notice to move in the ship. So, whilst they're in port, they're probably on 7 or 10 days or 2 weeks notice to move. So 2 weeks out, you go, we need to reduce your notice to move to a week. A week out, you reduce your notice to move to 3 days. 3 days from potential deployment, it takes down to 24 hours. So what that does is it gets the crews into the areas. You start to put all your supplies onto it. You then get the crews on the ship when you reduce it to 24 hours notice to move. You've got all your ammunition on there. You've got all your food on there. You've got the fuel in. You're doing your final little tightening your nuts and bolts that you need to do before you go off. And then when the politicians make the decision to go, you go immediately.
Yeah.
If that notice to move hasn't been reduced, that's a military failure. If the politicians have stopped the military from doing that, then that's a political failure. If the planning hasn't happened to do that, it's a military failure. And if the politicians hadn't insisted on getting ready for that, then it's a political planning failure. Or it could be the military have got everything ready and everything is sitting there and the government is just saying, just hang on a minute. If that's doing it, that's an abrogation of duty by our politicians. And that is shockingly bad.
What has utterly astonished me in all of this is we saw America moving its assets into the seas and oceans in the region. We saw them making sure they were surrounding Iran with kinetic capabilities. And for weeks, we've had the disgusting, vile, bloodthirsty oppression of the Iranian people, and Donald Trump saying, don't worry, I'll come. And all the commentary here, like, why isn't he doing anything? Why is he not bombing Iran? And so this dragged on for weeks. People saying, well, he said he was going to. And I remember them all using the word taco. Oh, all the smug leftist legacy media presenters and commentators. Oh, taco. Oh, he's bailed on it again. Then all of a sudden when he does something, like, oh my God, I can't believe he's doing that. And but we knew. We knew that this was coming. It was so patently obvious at some point. Yeah. Israel and the US were going to strike Iran. We knew that. And we know that the UK and the US have various military bases, land, sea and air, all around that area. And so to me it would appear, I know we've only got 3 out of 6 warships like able to even go anywhere, which in itself is horrifying. But the fact that after the event, we've had to have France, for crying out loud, and Greece rush to protect Cyprus, because Cyprus is saying, like, hey, we're now getting attacked. Yeah. Come on. And we, in theory, should have the bigger military, the better military. We're a naval empire. Yeah. And the fact that after the event, after pressure and public humiliation from America, Starmer's gone, OK, I'll send a ship then. And it turns out, well, it's going to take a while to get there. And they say, well, we can't send it yet. Yeah. You suddenly realise how undefended Britain is and how exposed our airmen, our servicemen and women in Akrotiri are.
Well, and in other parts of the Middle East. The government knew that something was happening because they forward deployed F-35 jets from 617 Downbuster Squadron to RAF Akrotiri. They put more Typhoon jets down there. So they knew this was coming. Right. And therefore, there's no reason why they shouldn't have put further air defence capability in. They could have put some of the Army, I think it's called Sky Sabre, I'll need to check this, air defence missiles down at Akrotiri. They haven't done that. And they could have reduced the notice to move and started to move a Type 45 destroyer, which is perfect to get into the area, down into there, or not withdrawn it from the Middle East beforehand, parked it in Cyprus for a bit, or parked it in Gibraltar so it's closer and could be maintained and stuff in Gibraltar. But they haven't done that. And there's been abject failure somewhere. The government will have known what's going on. Right. I haven't got access to any classified material whatsoever, and I could see what was brewing and what was going to happen.
I could see it. I've never served in the military. I just sit here using my eyes in the same way that it was patently obvious Russia was going to cross the border into Ukraine. It was patently obvious that this offensive was going to take place. If the people were publicly talking about it, Donald Trump was saying, we're going to do something. Iran, be careful, we're going to come and get you. It was being said. All the assets were in place. We knew. And we'll have known that
Iran will have bitten back. And we know that they've got proxies all over the region, and we know that Cyprus will have been a target. Now, the Greek ships and the French ships are there to protect Cyprus as a sovereign territory, because Cyprus is part of the EU. So this is the EU stepping up. It's a pity that the UK can't step up now that we're independent of the EU. It just happens to be that on Cyprus there are sovereign base areas that are British sovereign territory that we are responsible for looking after. Now, the EU umbrella that's going to put over it is now looking after British sovereign territory. This is not what we voted for in Brexit.
It's we're in a pickle. There's all sorts of questions that need to be asked. But before we go to break, I just want to come back to you on what you had said earlier about the interrelation between US and UK capabilities that exist, where, you know, this idea that Starmer said, we're not involved, we didn't know, it doesn't ring true.
No, it doesn't ring true. I'm sorry, there's activities going on around the world where we are so closely linked in what's going on. We know just about everything of what each other's doing. There are certain areas where you compartmentalize and you don't let them have access. We didn't let the Americans have access to our intelligence and what we're doing operationally in Northern Ireland, because this was domestic. But when you've got something on a global scale, like has been happening in the Middle East, especially when you've got negotiations going on, the details from those negotiations, the nuclear negotiations, will have been briefed out at highly classified levels in through the intelligence agencies. There's no way could Starmer not know what was going to happen.
It's not the first time information's come from the intelligence agencies, and Starmer seems to have decided to act in a way one would imagine contrary to their suggestions. OK, we're going to take a short break now, but as you can see, there is so much to talk about. I want to start addressing a bit later on in the programme whether Trump is right that perhaps Starmer is being pressured by certain communities within the United Kingdom, and this is now affecting geopolitics. But before that, after the break, we're going to be discussing global economics. We had the spring statement yesterday, worth nothing, ignore it, throw it in the bin. Every projection, everything that came out of Rachel Reeves' mouth, just moot now, doesn't mean anything, because well, the OBR has even come out and said today, well, you know, global economy could be in a bit of trouble given that the Strait of Hormuz is effectively shut, given that energy prices are rocketing up around the world. We're going to be at the sharp end of all of this, and we're going to be discussing why and how that might affect you just after this.
No doubt that the British government has acted in an incredibly weak, equivocal way. It's easy to start a war, very difficult to ensure that the aftermath doesn't descend into complete chaos.
What's your view of that outburst of Trump?
Well, Trump doesn't mince his words, but I think his criticism is justified. I mean, we should have realised where our national interests stood, and he should have expressed immediate support.
We have pursued a ludicrous energy policy, preceding this government, frankly, and all the knock-on effects to that for our economy are catastrophic.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Now, we have been told there is no need to panic buy petrol over the Iran crisis, except, of course, every day 80 oil and gas tankers pass through the Strait of Hormuz, and right now They can't. And not only that, oil fields, gas fields, all being very deliberately targeted by Iran to send shockwaves around the world. International oil prices have climbed 12% since fighting began. Gas prices have gone up by as much as 90%. Over the previous winters, we have been critically dependent upon Qatar for liquefied natural gas. It's kept our lights on because guess what? Sun don't shine during the winter months that much. And now Qatar is not going to be selling its LNG. Don't even know if it can. Has it got access to it? So we know that we are going to be facing a huge economic shockwave. And with Britain having already some of the highest energy prices in the world, still being dependent upon foreign imports of fossil fuels to make sure we don't face blackouts, given that we have, of course, banned exploratory drilling in the North Sea and essentially concreted over extant oil wells, I think we could be in a spot of bother. Let's speak now to Paul Johnson, former director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Now, Paul, I'd imagine when Rachel Reeves wrote her spring statement and was preparing for that a few weeks ago, well, she might not have expected to be announcing what her plans were and what the projections were and what the wins were in the context of everything potentially going, for want of a better phrase, belly up. What on earth do you think is going to happen now? How badly is Britain likely to be impacted if what we see is a protracted crisis in the Middle East?
You're right. I mean, clearly the forecasts were made well before any of this happened in Iran. You have to feel sorry for us, the British public, but also actually for the Chancellor when it comes to this. I think she was hoping to have a stable period. I mean, it's been rather nice, hasn't it? We've come up to this spring statement. There's been no speculation and actually no policy surprises yesterday, but this huge uncertainty created by what's happening in the Middle East. Now, I mean, the answer to your question really is it depends. It depends on how long this goes on. So throughout history, we've had lots of these kind of spikes where energy prices go up briefly because of something happening in the Middle East or somewhere else, and then they come back down again once things settle down. And if that happens, then the effect will be pretty small. On the other hand, we've had other examples where this has lasted a long time, whether we're looking at the Ukraine war or whether we're looking back to the crises of the 1970s, and that can have a really big effect on the economy, on household incomes, on everything else. So it all depends on how long this goes on. I don't think we are going to see the scale of increase in prices that we saw after the Ukraine war, and I don't think we're going to see the scale of global economic disruption we saw in the 1970s. But if this goes on for a period of time, then clearly we're going to see a drag on the economy, a drag on our incomes, and higher energy prices.
How is this affecting stock markets? How is this going to affect the UK's borrowing ability? One would assume that coming over the horizon is going to be inflation. One of the things that she, gave herself a pat on the back for yesterday was saying, well, we haven't put up interest rates. In fact, they've come down 6 times under our watch, well, under the Bank of England's watch. Inflation is now under control. Well, the thing is, whenever you suddenly find yourself in a situation of fuel shortages, the inability to move products from one part of the world to the other, and we know that Iran's targeting the Strait of Hormuz, naturally the end result is always inflation.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this is where governments don't do themselves any favours when they claim that things that are happening anyway are down to their great management. I mean, actually, the fact that interest rates were coming down was going to happen anyway, really not much to do with what this government has done. And you heard Rachel Reeves yesterday effectively blaming the last government for the 11% inflation we had back in 2022. That wasn't the last government's fault. That was the result of the Ukraine war. So governments actually have less control than they often claim they have, and equally it will be very unfair to blame this government if we get a spike in inflation as a result of what's happening in the Middle East now. But yes, we will probably again, if this persists, and it really is a big if this persists, then this is bad news on all fronts. It'll create an increased cost of living here. It'll be bad news for growth. It'll be bad news for the Chancellor in terms of public finances, and a really tough decision actually for the Bank of England as to what they do on interest rates, because you're right, it will increase inflation. You'd normally think, well, if inflation's up, that is a reason for increasing interest rates, or at least not cutting them. On the other hand, this is just a negative shock, which will be bad for the economy more generally. And if you increase interest rates at the same time, then that could slow the economy even further. So this is another tough decision for the Bank of England. I think the most likely outcome is that interest rates will fall rather less quickly than we previously expected.
You say it wouldn't necessarily be fair to blame this government. I tend to disagree on that, because I would suggest that the first priority of any government is the defence of the realm, and I would say that this government and previous governments have actually not shored up any sort of resilience when it comes to energy self-sufficiency, food self-sufficiency, manufacturing self-sufficiency. And when you suddenly end up in a situation where you are on the outskirts of a war, that you could be dragged into that conflict, or at least you're going to be suffering the shockwaves of that, then when you have not protected your country, knowing that you're going to be able to keep the lights on, knowing you're going to be able to keep factories manufacturing the things that you need, knowing you're going to be able to get the food and the produce you need, that has a big impact, which pushes up prices because of scarcity. Do you think that's a fair assessment, that actually this government has potentially been, and I would add previous governments, rather self-indulgent by sort of playing a very sort of, I would say lackadaisical game, with thinking there's not a crisis at the moment, there won't be, so we can focus on all of these nice-to-have priorities, instead of looking at, wow, if we do come to a moment where the proverbial hits the fan, we're going to need to make sure that we can access oil and gas in the North Sea, etc.
Well, I think you've got a fair point on accessing oil and gas in the North Sea, though not that the decisions that this government has made would make any difference to that now. I mean, that's those choices are about access over the long term, because new drilling takes an awful long time to come through. But but the future will happen, and I think that is an issue. Otherwise, I don't think what you said, frankly, is fair. Or if it is fair, then it's a criticism not really of governments but of the electorate. Because if we had done as you suggest and tried to be significantly more self-sufficient in food, or significantly more self-sufficient in manufacturing, that would have cost us an enormous amount of money. It would have meant that we'd be even significantly worse off than we are now. I mean, what I think we've done is take part in a world trading system, which we've taken advantage of, and has maintained at least our living standards over the last few years, even though they haven't been going up. I think if we'd invested tens of billions, and it probably would have been hundreds of billions, in supporting manufacturing and farming and trying to become more self-sufficient, we would be an awful lot poorer than we are now. And I don't think, quite rightly, the electorate would have stood for that.
Paul, thank you ever so much. Paul Johnson there, former director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies. I get that we live in a globalised world, Phil. I get that things that cost far less to make in China, and it's cheaper for us to import those things rather than make them here. I guess, I understand that the international community has pressurised people into net zero. I don't think we should have jumped through those hoops. But I do think that a lot of what this Labour Party government has done, and frankly the previous government, has almost been an act of national self-sabotage. Because to ban exploratory drilling, OK, you could turn around and say, we don't want to use oil and gas because we're going to hug some trees, etc. Yep. But to actually pour concrete in those wells, to ban the exploratory drilling, is tying your hands behind your back in the moment of crisis. And this is, and I think we've been woefully politically naive. Now, I understand we can't sit there and be Fortress Britain and say we're going to manufacture everything ourselves, we're going to only eat food that we grow on this island. But at the same time, you always have to look what your enemies are doing. There's been a huge campaign in China to become 100% self-sufficient in agriculture, because they can see the way the wind is blowing, because they want to control the maritime routes, as does Iran. This is the new theatre of war. Whoever controls those trade arteries messes with the global economy. And as an island, as a blimmin' island, we should have been alive to that.
Yeah, and China is building food storage facilities, oil and gas storage facilities, and all the rest, over and above what it requires on its normal use. And this government has made fiscal decisions that make no sense whatsoever in an unstable world. You look at the tens of the billions of pounds that have been given to Ed Milliwatt for his crazy green schemes that were one of the first announcements the government made.
Right.
Those haven't been withdrawn. Look at the billions of pounds front-loading that will have been taken out of this year's budget to front-load the Chagos deal. Thank goodness that has been delayed and all the rest of it. But that is a political decision that didn't need to be made. So we're seeing the government making political decisions that are costing us billions and billions and billions of money that is here today, instead of putting that into something to make us more robust for the instability that there is, and saying, yes, we've got an ambition to make those decisions, but we'll push that off until we get a little bit more stability, because our actions are not going to influence really what's going on in the world. We need to get our actions to make sure that the British people are properly looked after. They're not doing that. That's choice. That's political choice. And that's down to political choice from this government, even though they've only been in for such a short period of time.
Couldn't agree more. Before we go to break, let's read some of your messages, because they have been flooding in, and I want that to continue, because we like to involve all of you when it comes to presenting this programme. You are also basically producers and presenters. It is a democratic system, let us say. At least I'm not quite so bitter, says Richie in Whitecroft, about the millions we've been giving to France to stop the boats. Now they've sent help to Cyprus. Dear Lord, we're in a mess. Don't you think they've gone to help us, though? As Philip was saying, it's because it's an EU member state and because Cyprus said help. Alex, where is the UK missile defence? If Iran sent 100 drones to the UK, not one would be shot down. Can you answer that quickly? In terms of where, if Iran, I mean, I'm pretty sure that they don't have enough range missiles to hit us.
Yeah, they don't have the capability to hit us with their long-range missiles or with their drones without putting drones onto a Q ship and launching them from a ship. Could we shoot them down? No. Simple.
Wow.
We do not have the capability in the UK to provide an air defence umbrella around even our most critical of targets. We might be able to get one or two fighter jets in the air with one or two weapons that could potentially impact them, but could we find them, track them and get them in on time? No.
Although it does have to be mentioned that it was the first time an F-35 has been in combat shooting something down.
Well, yeah, £100 million aircraft with hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of missiles to shoot down
25,000
a drone that costs $35,000.
Yeah.
We are getting this wrong.
There you go. Right, we're going to be checking in with my good friend Fleur Hassanein, former Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, after this. We were speaking to her yesterday as the alarms went off and she had to run to a bomb shelter. So we're going to make sure she's OK and well, get the latest from the ground on Israel. And also, I want her opinion on whether or not Starmer's decision-making is being influenced by trying to get the Muslim vote. That's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. So much to talk about today. But first of all, let's check in on our good friend Fleur Hassanein. Fleur, how are you doing?
Hi, Alex. How are you?
I'm glad to see you not sprinting for safety right now. How was your night?
Actually, we managed to sleep all night, which is not a given. We were woken up just before 5 minutes before 6 o'clock by another alarm. So we all run to the shelter. And it's been quiet since. So I hope we can have our interview in peace and quiet, not like yesterday.
Seems like nobody needs to get a gym membership in Israel. You're
Good point.
One thing I love about Israelis is that amazing sort of blitz spirit that you guys have. It's really extraordinary.
We make lemonades out of lemon, Alex.
You really do. You really do. Sometimes I sit there thinking I'd like to hang out in the bomb shelters with you guys. There's some of the clips I've seen. It looks like
well, you love this. Somebody came up with an app so that when you go into a bomb shelter, you can see who's single in the bomb shelter.
You're kidding me.
Yes, you can't make this up. So that you scan a QR code and you can see who's single. Who knows? Maybe you'll get some couples coming out of the experience. You never know.
This is amazing. This is one of my favourite revelations ever. My producer's looking at me through the glass, shaking his head because he can see he knows me so well. Ted knows what's going on in my head. Like, oh, Alex needs a date. Time to go to Israel. Anyway, let's talk quite seriously now because Donald Trump has launched a blistering attack against Sir Keir Starmer, saying, you know, this is clearly no Churchill that he's dealing with, but has also basically said, well, you know, he is in the pocket of some of the foreign imports into the United Kingdom who might have their own geopolitical viewpoints. And an interesting thing, yesterday, our Prime Minister was in Westminster Hall, in the Palace of Westminster, in our Parliament, where 100+ Muslims were celebrating the end of Ramadan, and he was there. This is what he had to say to them.
But on Iran, I want to make clear the UK was not involved in the offensive strikes of the US and Israel, and that remains the case.
I mean, Fleur, what do you make of that? He's kind of proven Trump's point, hasn't he?
Well, you know, the whole thing is a little bit pathetic at this point, Alex, because, well, you know, his original statement was like, oh, you know, Iran is a terrible regime. The Islamic Republic is a terrible regime, but we have nothing to do with it. It's almost like an apologist. That's what he is. He's actually an apologist for being a leader. Somebody, I can't remember where, I think it was on talkTV, said yesterday, he's a lawyer, not a leader. So he's basically, the language he uses is so kind of legalistic. God forbid we should actually take a side, take a stand. And doesn't he understand something that history has taught us? And that is that neutrality only serves the repressor. And the repressor and the oppressor are the Islamic Republic of Iran, who have been killing British nationals and Americans and Israelis and people all around the world. You know that England has foiled Islamic Republic terror plots in England. And he wants to be neutral. Why does he want to be neutral? He's either scared or he's pandering to the vote. But you know what? At the end of the day, Alex, leadership is not about taking a poll and seeing what everything is. Leadership is about taking a stand and sometimes doing what's not popular. That's real leadership. And so unfortunately, Trump is right. He's no Churchill, but more than that, he's worse than Chamberlain.
I tend to agree with you. And actually, when you look at some of the things that have been taking place in the United Kingdom, really unsurprisingly, unfortunately, since the outbreak of this war, it reminds me of what happened in the aftermath of October the 7th. We've got British students mourning the beloved Ayatollah at universities. A dozen student societies have expressed their sincere condolences to the beloved Iranian supreme leader. One advertised a candlelight vigil in his memory. There have been vigils at British mosques for the martyr, Ayatollah Khamenei. Talk to me about his successor, the new supreme leader, his son. I don't quite know how you pronounce his name. Let's go for Mujtaba, but you may well be able to correct me on that. He wasn't necessarily going to be the first choice, as he's not a high-ranking cleric, and I understand that in the Shia religion, actually sort of primogeniture, the inheritance of a son from a father, isn't the done thing. But given all the other candidates probably aren't alive anymore, this is the man we've got. What do you make of it? Israel's already basically said, well, look, there's a crosshairs on your forehead, son. You're probably not going to last very long.
Exactly. We can't have this fanatic clerical regime taking the whole world and taking us all hostage. The minute these people get weapons of mass destruction, then it's the beginning of the end. It's the countdown of the end of civilization. People don't understand who we're dealing with. People don't understand. But let me tell you something curious you might know not about this new leader of the Islamic regime is that he's got very strong ties to the UK. Yeah. He owns property. He visits often, and he's been doing that with impunity, even though he was the son of a murderer dictator from the Islamic Republic for years. And so, yeah, maybe Keir Starmer could be very proud of that. But honestly, it's, you know, what's really sad to me, you know, I'm Israeli, but I'm also a Brit, Alex, is that Britain saved the world twice. First World War, Second World War, Britain saved the world. And now they can't even save themselves, and they can't even protect their own bases in Cyprus. What's happened?
It's a big question. I've got a little factoid for you that might make you chuckle. You said that this new Ayatollah has been visiting the UK with impunity for a long time. Well, leaked US intelligence suggests he's been visiting the UK with impotence for quite a long time. 6 visits to private hospitals because the man was unable to produce an heir. I don't know how true that is, but it certainly put a wry smile on my face.
Oh dear.
What is one of the big questions now, and you know how it works in media, where someone asks a question or someone makes a point and everyone just parrots it all of the time and keeps repeating it. And the current one is, so what's the end point? How is this going to work out? Which I tend to say, like, well, no one knows the end point of a war. You go in there because you've got to defend yourself. You're having to either, you know, preeminently strike, but it's still in reaction to a threat. And no one's got a crystal ball who says, well, you know, in about 6 days' time, that's going to happen, and then this will happen. But it's being sort of used, isn't it, to say, well, perhaps they shouldn't have done it because they don't quite know what the end goal is. My feeling is that's probably not correct, because Iran has for a long time been the enemy of the West. I went to a talk about 7 years ago in Westminster talking about Reza Pahlavi and bringing back the extradited son of the late Shah. I don't think at all that this is a sort of, you know, blind leading the blind, let's just go in there for no reason. But I wonder if you have a better understanding of how Israel might see things playing out, whether this is going to be about the wholesale removal of the regime and what its replacement would be.
Yeah. Well, you know, a lot of people are a little bit traumatized, and I can understand that with the experience in Iraq and Afghanistan, where nothing really changed. But I want to let people know that Iran is very different. First of all, Iranians feel like one country and one nation, and yeah, there are minorities. But it's not like Iraq and it's not like Afghanistan where it's all tribal. The Persian people are different. They're not the same. B, they've got a very strong Iranian diaspora, as you know, Alex, from what you've seen in London, and you see it in America, and you've seen it in Europe. They've got a very strong, very influential, very wealthy diaspora. People who are willing to really get their hands dirty, to get their countries back and running. I've got 3 friends who are making now a very dangerous trip back to Iran to try and be there for this transition. And then the people have to decide now. At the moment, something that never happened has happened, is that the people in Iran are shouting the name Reza Pahlavi, and the diaspora are shouting the same name, Reza Pahlavi. And Reza Pahlavi himself has said, look, I don't want to take over. I just want to be a transitional leader. I don't know if he's the answer, or I don't know if there's internal opposition. But the point is that these people, after 47 years, they are ready to take charge and take their country back from the occupation of these Shia crazy lunatic clerics. And that's the main thing.
And then finally, Fleur, there's also been a sort of a few contradictions and speculations. Again, I think most of it's been deliberate mischief making from our left-leaning legacy media about who started it. Oh, was it Israel who forced America's hand, which sort of seemed to be something that Marco Rubio suggested? Or was it more that Donald Trump was right when he said, no, we decided we were going to do this? Or does it actually even matter who basically pulled the trigger on this?
Look, ultimately, it doesn't matter who pulled the trigger, but the point is this, that America has a strong leadership who understands that the world cannot afford to let this regime get weapons of mass destruction, because then they're going to be putting the whole world in danger. And Donald Trump understood it. Whoever was going to shoot first, it doesn't matter. He understands that Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon. This is what started this. And if you want any more proof, they sat down with Witkoff, the negotiations, and they said to Witkoff, we have enough for 11 nuclear bombs. Does anybody want to take the risk of allowing this Islamic crazy regime, this fundamentalist regime in Iran have 11 nuclear bombs? Who wants to do that? Thank God we got President Donald Trump. And let's not forget one thing, which he reminded us yesterday. They tried to kill him twice. Do you think that doesn't play into it either? Come on. They are the enemy of our civilization. Whoever is not standing on the right side of history is only hindering us with the Americans trying to save civilization, trying to save the world.
It's always fantastic speaking to you, Fleur. Stay safe and let's catch up again ASAP. The brilliant Fleur Hassan Naoum there. Do you think it's just lazy journalism, lazy politics to hark back to the Gulf Wars and say, well, were there weapons of mass destruction? Were they legal? Oh, look what happened in Afghanistan. Look what happened in Iraq. And then look at the situation in Iran and draw parallels? Or is there a point there that we need to be asking those questions?
We need to ask those questions all the time. I'm going to correct you on something. The argument over the end state is critical. From a military planning perspective, the first thing that you have to be given politically, and our politicians are terrible at doing it, is the end state. What do you want to achieve? It may not be achievable, but you've got a goal that you're aiming for and you work back. That will never come into the public domain, because as soon as you give that as an end state out there, then the Iranians know what you're trying to achieve. Therefore, they can work out what your plan is going to be and they can defend against it. So we can keep saying we don't know it. You're not going to know it when you get there. Now, Donald Trump has hinted to it. It's regime change. Yeah. And therefore...
Hinted? He's called for it pretty much.
Exactly. Therefore, the military planners will work back from that. You cannot plan military operations unless you know what you're trying to focus on in the future. It hasn't worked at many times beforehand. That's because you get what's called mission creep, and that's what happened in Iraq. That's what happened in Afghanistan. That's what happened elsewhere. Where Iraq, there wasn't a proper end state stated. Tony Blair and Alistair Campbell took us into that. But we look at the results of that. In Iraq, 179 British troops were killed. While I was there, I lost 13. My best friend was coming out to see me. He was blown in two on his way out in a convoy to see me by an explosively formed projectile triggered by a triggering device that came from Iran. They are linked to that. In the last period of time, there have been 190 attacks by Iranian-backed groups directly against international shipping in the Red Sea and the surround. That is affecting the global trade.
And that's in the space of a year?
Yes.
190 offences. Well, and also in front of the world's eyes, October the 7th.
Yes.
I don't know why we sit here pretending that, well, Iran's done nothing to deserve this. I mean,
the whole way through, and from 1979 when they've been dealing with the Americans. Remember, 44 days of U.S. hostages, 241 Marines killed in a Iranian bomb explosion in Beirut. In Iraq, the US lost 603 troops. In the last year alone, there have been 170 attacks by the Iranians or Iranian-backed proxies against US interests in the Middle East.
Now,
My goodness.
You're a man who knows things with his ear to the ground and connections that I'm very envious of. So just before we go to break, what did you make of what Fleur said about Iran essentially bragging or suggesting to Witkoff that they could make 11 nuclear warheads?
Well, it's not the thing to do when you go into negotiations and poke the bear. Now, I don't necessarily believe what Steve Witkoff says. Iran said 460 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. That won't quite make 11 different nuclear warheads. But it's not just what Iran can make; it's what Iran can acquire. And we don't know what the relationship is between Iran and Russia. Remember, they've been supplying lots of stuff. If Russia just transferred one nuclear warhead to Iran, it gives it a capability. Over. If the intelligence services identified that as a possibility, and Iran was building lots of long-range ballistic missiles which could carry a nuclear warhead, that's enough to turn around and say, we need to stop this and stop it quickly.
See, my American version of you, Rear Admiral Mike Hewitt, who is intelligence in the American Navy, Big Mike, let's call him, to the Big Phil. He said to me on Monday's programme, because he's, he has his ears into everything going on in the US, he said that part of those negotiations, the US had said to everyone, we'll build you nuclear power stations for free. We'll give them to you. Right, let's take a break now. Keep your thoughts coming in because getting so many messages, and I've got some brilliant calls lined up as well. So we'll be taking those just after these commercials afford my minuscule salary. If you want to join the conversation, it's 03444 99 1000. It's your normal network rate. You can use that number as well to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number if you'd rather send me a text message. If you'd like to be old-fashioned and use SMS, you have to write the word talk before you write your message. And we're going to be talking to you just after this.
No doubt that the British government has acted in an incredibly weak, equivocal way. It's easy to start a war, very difficult to ensure that the aftermath doesn't descend into complete chaos.
What's your view of that outburst of Trump?
Well, Trump doesn't mince his words, but I think his criticism is justified. I mean, we should have realised where our national interest stood, and he should have expressed immediate support.
We have pursued a ludicrous energy policy, preceding this government, frankly, and all the knock-on effects to that for our economy are catastrophic.
The Green Party have won the Denton and Gorton by-election. Labour in third place.
Breaking news that Peter Mandelson has now been arrested. So Mandy and Andy have now both had their collars felt.
What would Andrew Loney tell them to do?
To come clean, be honest. And if Charles is complicit in this cover-up, which I believe he is, then I think he has to fall on his sword.
When you define sex, or gender or sex, what you mean is biological sex, and that's a man or woman.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Lots of you wanting to message and call. So let's crack on, shall we? Let's speak to Daniel in Epsom. I'm going to bring Philip into this because, Daniel, if you happen to have a question, I would venture that Philip might be better at answering it than me. But if it's an opinion, fire away. Whatever it is, let us know. Good morning to you, Daniel.
Good morning, Alex. Good morning, Philip.
Good morning, Daniel.
I just want to say that I'm just embarrassed that we have this government. I'm embarrassed that we're led by some of the people that we're led by. I can't believe, I'm 48, I can't believe the Green Party are polling second. And if you kind of look even at their manifesto in any way, anyone sane would never vote for them. But I can't really understand, the Chagos deal. You don't have to be, an international kind of politician to understand that it's dumb. We own a piece of land. We're going to give it away and then pay rent on it for the next 100 years. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I think that the Labour Party's main problem is they don't do things because they're the right thing to do for the British public. They do things out of ideology.
It's funny you say that because the one thing that drives me mad is every time you see someone from the Labour Party on TV, they actually literally say, because it's the right thing to do. It's like you can play bingo, and I find it so patronising and inverting the truth. But Daniel, Philip and I were discussing this just before we came on air about the Chagos Islands. Philip, we were talking, weren't we, about the cabal of lawyers around Starmer and quite what might be going on there.
There is no logic to the Chagos Island deal whatsoever. There are exemptions in the non-binding United Nations finding that turned around and said, hey, the UK should do this. We're exempted from it under a number of different elements of international law. So it's cherry picking going on. As more and more it's about and other lawyers, anyone sensible will park this completely until there's a complete and fully open public inquiry into what's going on, because there's something dodgy behind it. There has to be.
I've advised my good friend Niall Garden, who works at the Heritage Foundation in America, the biggest think tank, right-wing think tank in America, who's in charge of European foreign affairs there. I said, you need to get Congress in America to subpoena for all of the legal documents from Starmer, Hermer and Sands. Subpoena them. Let's get this out in the open. Before we say goodbye to Daniel, he talks about this meteoric rise of the Green Party. Now, it's easy to see that it is a vehicle that has been hijacked by the Muslim vote, which is a very sophisticated, well-funded organisation. They don't care about whether it's LGBTQ and all of that. They're able to park that on one side and go, well, political me will use to Keir and support that. Private me obviously hates it. But we've heard a long time, I know this is your sort of ballpark, we've heard a long time about Russian infiltration, Russia, the Brexit vote. I'm looking at the meteoric emergence of the Green Party and wondering if there is a lot of potentially hostile state interference that is essentially making a Green Party psyop here, whether they're using bot farms to push the Green Party, with it having been chosen that this will be the vehicle for an Islamist voice.
Oh, this is 100% the playbook that will come out of Moscow. You stir the pot, create division, and try and enable that. Now, does that mean that the Russians are deliberately directing the Green Party and everything else? No. But will they be reinforcing the messages and everything else? Yes.
But is it necessarily just the Russians? That's my question.
Chinese will be behind it as well, and the two will almost certainly be working together on it to try
with Iran as well,
to try and amplify Iran to a lesser degree, but they'll rely on Russia and China to do that and accelerate it. And of course, when you come to the polls, whenever staunch Labour supporters want to turn around and put a protest vote out there and they're asked by a pollster who they're going to vote for, they're not going to turn around and say Reform or the Tories. Nobody is going to say the Lib Dems, so they're going to say the Green Party. So the polls will get a skewed view of what's going on from people who want to remain loyal to the Labour Party, but they just don't know where to go. And they're ones who'll probably just not go out and vote next time.
Daniel, thank you ever so much for your call. OK, let us now speak to Robert, who's in Hertfordshire. Good morning to you, Robert.
Good morning. May I say you're looking very nice this morning, if I may make so bold?
Well, you may. Thank you very much. Not what I think. I know. In a time of war and bombs, it's always nice to get a charming compliment. So thank you very much.
Well, listen, I'm 73, and the thing is, if I was 30 years younger, I'd still be too old for you.
If you were 30 years younger, you'd be 1 year older than me. So don't worry about that.
Well, I want to talk about the conflict and the hypocrisy of Starmer, but before that, while you was on to Zach Goldsmith...
Zach Polanski.
Polanski, sorry, I know. I understand he's a vegan, so with his Muslim chums, what's his stance then on halal slaughter? And the other thing is, when the love affair ends with his Muslim chums, he has to be careful they're not going to sing him off the roof for being gay.
Well, do you know, well, this is an interesting thing, isn't it? Like I was saying, Phil, earlier, I mean, I think that the Muslim vote, or let's call it the Islamist vote, because Islam is a religion, Islamism is the politicisation of that religion. And it is clearly Islamism that is hijacking the Green Party, using it as a vehicle. For the Green Party, they just want to be popular, and a bit like the Labour Party for years, they see a big juicy block vote and it will get them into power. And it's amazing, isn't it? They don't, for the party that's all about environment and, hug a tree, they don't care about halal slaughter. They don't care about the fact that many conservative Muslims are absolutely against homosexuality. But neither do the Islamists care that that's what the Green Party stand for. It's a really strange marriage of convenience, but a very dangerous one.
It's a party of hypocrisy, full stop. You look at the latest Green Party MP who enjoys her 5-star holidays across the world and runs fossil fuel driven cars. It's do what I say, not what I do, but what they say, they'll contradict it tomorrow. Oh, that's what Starmer's doing anyway.
Wow. We're used to that in politics now. Thank you very much for your compliment there, Robert in Hertfordshire. So many messages coming in. Keep them coming. I just cannot keep up with all the different strands we're having to cover. 03444991000, the number to send me a WhatsApp. 87222, the number to send a text. Write the word talk before you text. A lot more coming up. We're going to be speaking to the Shadow Attorney General on what he thinks the legal advice should be just after this. So don't go anywhere. I will see you in a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and welcome back to the show in what continues to be a very dramatic period in history, I would suggest, as conflict escalates in the Middle East, dragging more and more states into the mire. Iran continues its offensive, not just against US bases, but targeting civilian sites across the Gulf, and retaliations as well taking place. An Israeli jet has just shot down an Iranian fighter jet. But one of the big questions that has been hanging everything in the balance ever since Saturday, and there's been a development here as well, I would suggest, when it comes to what's going on internationally, is Sir Keir Starmer came out and said, and I'm going to say, I'll say it through gritted teeth because I'm fed up of hearing these two words, but actually in saying it through gritted teeth, I strangely sound like Sir Keir Starmer. International law. He's turned around and said, well, international law might preclude us from doing this. He's been going to great pains to say to Muslims gathering to celebrate the end of Ramadan in Westminster Hall yesterday, we are not part of this. We didn't do this. Now, interestingly, over the course of the weekend, it appeared when Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, was asked about whether he supported the offensive action by Donald Trump, the answer was yes. He seems to have now taken a plane down to Australia, hanging out with Albanese, those three. Carney, Albanese and Starmer often doing things in lockstep. Oh, look, you can put kids in bikinis on Glock, so we must ban X. They do seem to sort of triangulate between the three when they want to make some sort of move. But Mark Carney's now questioning whether what America and Israel have done is viable under international law. I would suggest it probably is. I think Philip thinks it probably is. But the person who's been the greatest inspiration to my way of thinking is the Shadow Attorney General, Lord Wolfson, because he put out a brilliant detailed post on X explaining his thinking. So we have him on the programme to do it for us today. Lord Wolfson, thank you so much for joining us. What do you make of this sort of... First of all, why would anybody, when it's very clear that Iran is an extremely dangerous, theocratic regime, want to start muddying the waters by banging on about international law? And also, why do you think that when it comes to international law, what America and Israel have done is perfectly acceptable?
Well, thank you for having me on. I think there were two questions, really. Your first question is, international law seemed to come into play for most people when people, in particular states such as America and Israel, attacked Iran. We didn't hear much about international law when Iran was killing tens of thousands of its own protesters. So people do seem to have a selective interest in international law. But international law is important. Don't get me wrong. I think international law is important. As a country, we ought to abide by it. The real question is, what does international law require of states? And I set out in my tweet a justification for the initial action which America and Israel took. But the truth is that matters have moved on significantly, because since then we have had a direct attack on a British sovereign base in Cyprus. Now, it seems to me that there can be no question but that we can respond forcefully to an attack on our own sovereign base. So we can have an interesting discussion about the legality of the original action by the United States and Israel. I've set out my position in some detail. But as we sit here today, there can be no question that we should be taking a muscular response to an attack on our sovereign base. And the problem I have now with the UK government position is this. The government position is that in respect of missiles which are targeted at our sovereign base in Cyprus, we will take defensive measures to take out those missiles. But what we won't do is attack to take out the missile launchers. But what we will do is allow the Americans to use our bases elsewhere to attack to take out the missile launchers, but not to take out the regime leaders who give the instructions to fire the missiles. Now, it seems to me that a good rule of thumb for any legal analysis is that if it leaves you with a result which is internally inconsistent and strategically naive, there are two options. One, international law has gone significantly awry, which is a possibility, or two, your legal analysis is wrong. And that's why I've suggested that the government's legal analysis is wrong, because it leaves us essentially relying on other states to defend our sovereign bases. And that is a ridiculous position for us to be in.
Talk to me about the role of Attorney General as Shadow Attorney General, because there's sort of two ways of looking at this in some respects. It's a bit like the Copernican revolution. Is the Attorney General there when a Prime Minister says, I want to do this, how, make this make sense legally, to then say to the Prime Minister, OK, that's what you want to do. This is legally how we prop it up, or this is where the dark areas will be? Or is it that the Attorney General says to the Prime Minister, this is what you're legally allowed to do, so now go and make your decision? A nuance there. But my concern is, I'm under the impression, I could be wrong, I'm not sitting in those meeting rooms, and I've certainly never been down to the pub with Starmer and Hermer, but I'm persistently under the impression that Hermer seems to be the one in control here. How does that role work as Shadow Attorney General or Attorney General?
Well, I think it works in the way you want it to work. In other words, the fundamental rule is that the Attorney General is there to make sure everything the government does is lawful. I think the way it ought to work, if I can use the analogy, for example, of imagine a cricket ground. You're there to sort of show how big the ground is, how big the playing area is. Where the politicians want to play the game within that area of lawfulness is frankly a political decision. You're there to set the boundary rope, to say you can't go beyond the boundary because that is unlawful. What you're not there to do is to say you must play here or you must play there. The truth is, in all of these areas, there is an overlap of law and politics. And that is embodied in the position and role of the Attorney General, who in our Constitution is both a lawyer and also a politician. I do think it's important to keep the two separate. I note, for example, this Attorney General is effectively treated as a member of Cabinet. I don't think that's wise. I think the Attorney General should attend Cabinet only for those matters either.
It's interesting because a diplomat has said that UK foreign policy is being choked up by lawyers. It certainly seems to me, when you look at things such as the controversial deal over the Chagos Islands, when you now look at this sort of foot-dragging about supporting our greatest allies in an offensive against Iran, that it seems to me that it's definitely becoming a bit of a spanner in the works, a glitch in the system, slowing down what at times needs to be quite quick and decisive policy making.
I think it's actually more fundamental even than that. I think the real issue is this. There are some people who start from the proposition that law is the supreme virtue and questions are better decided by lawyers than by politicians. And I think there are a number of people in the government, I think the attorney is one, I think the Prime Minister is another, who quite like to redefine what are essentially political questions as legal questions. And then they say, oh, but you can't argue with our conclusions because this is all a matter of law. I take the view that political questions remain political questions and they have to be decided on the floor of the House of Commons and not in a court. And that is a fundamental distinction, I think, in the way that different people see the political world. Ultimately, these sorts of questions are intensely political. And I would suggest that the truth is that a lot of what is driving the government's response to the crisis in the Middle East is domestic political. Well, that they were unlawful. Every time they're asked on an interview whether these strikes were unlawful, they say, well, the lawfulness is a matter for the Americans to justify. But we don't say that about other international issues. We don't say that the lawfulness of Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a matter for the made earlier. I don't like the fact that the government often hide behind law and legality to cover up what are essentially political decisions.
I don't know what you make of this, but apparently now French President Emmanuel Macron has said the US-Israeli strikes on Iran were conducted outside of international law. The Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has decided to publicly slam the war as illegal, where Keir Starmer began raising the spectre of the legality or the legitimacy of the preemptive offensive strikes by Israel and America. It seems that other leaders in Europe are now
by acting prospectively if you're faced with an imminent attack. Now, how do you apply that to a nuclear threat? How real does a threat have to be before you can take steps to remove that threat? I had an online discussion with a leading international lawyer, and where he got to was that you have to be 51% against 49% satisfied that they were about to launch nuclear weapons. Well, if you're the leader of any country on earth, that's not the sort of gamble you're going to take. I think one of the issues is that international law has to cater for the world we live in. And we have to be real about the world we live in, about rogue states such as Iran, which frankly doesn't care a fig for international law, obtaining weapons which, once used, you can't put the nuclear bomb back in the box.
I'm just going to ask you a question. It's just come in from a viewer here, and it seems like a sort of silly, simple question. I'm not saying that to be offensive to you, Brian, who's messaging, because I actually think it's well worth asking, because it's something we keep talking about international law, don't we? And he just says, who sets international law and can we change it?
Brian's question is, if I may say, an absolutely fantastic question, because there are a number of sources of international law. And I don't want to turn your program into a seminar, but essentially international law comes from various sources. You have treaties between particular countries, you have conventions, which more countries sign up to, and you also have something called customary international law. In other words, the way states do things can both make and change international law. So Brian hits on a really important point. Part of international law involves looking at state practice, and custom and practice is part of international law. So I would suggest, if Brian isn't already signed up to a course on international law somewhere, he sounds like the sort of person who should, because he's hit on, if I may say, a really important point, that unlike domestic law, which is set really from two sources, one, parliamentary statutes, and two, court decisions, international law comprises treaties, conventions, decisions of international courts, but also customary international law, i.e. state practice. So it's a really good point he makes.
Yeah, no, it is one of those questions that you think, well, why has no one asked that? You kind of feel like an idiot asking it, but it is really important. So I'm going to ask you, Alex's version of Brian's question is, well, what happens when you break international law? Because there's plenty of rogue states out there, from Russia to Iran, the list goes on, who seemingly don't give a fig about international law until it's in their interest to start saber-rattling at the UN about international law. So when you are a country that just goes, well, you know, that...
We hold before. So if, for example, you break a treaty which has a court supervising it, you can be called before that court, and there are various international courts like that. You might law, and it goes back really to Brian's question, is because usually it's in everybody's interest to live in a world which is governed by rules and order rather than disorder. But of course, the problem comes when you're dealing with a state which, as you say, doesn't care about international law. And the German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, said yesterday that, of course, one of the problems in dealing with Iran, if you seek to abide by international law, is that he said it's like boxing with one arm tied behind your back. Maybe it's even boxing with both arms tied behind your back. And I think we do need to be clear-eyed about this. I mean, international law is there to make sure that we live in a world of order and rules. That's a good thing. But international law is not meant to be a suicide pact. We're not meant to roll over and have our strategic tummies tickled. And I think we do need to be realistic about that.
Is it fair to say, finally, that when it comes to the current state of play with international law and the supranational organisations that are the guardians of it, that there is a heck of a lot that is not fit for purpose anymore? For example, in the UN, the security...
The democracies are not a majority when you look around the world. So when we next hear the UN General Assembly said this, that or the other, we need to remember who's on it. So far as the Security Council is concerned, you're right. We've got Russia, who flagrantly breaches international law, and we've got China, which is a totalitarian communist state. And that's why I think we do need, as I said earlier, to be clear-eyed about this. International law is one thing. Morality is another. I think sometimes people confuse the two. I remember at the time of the Iraq war, two Church of England bishops wrote, I think, to the Times, saying that war would be immoral. That was the word they used, immoral, unless the United Nations Security Council had authorized it. Well, I fail to see how the vote of President Xi or President Putin makes something moral or not. So let's distinguish between international law and morality. So far as international law is concerned, we have historically been, and we should remain, a country which abides by international law. But we should be very careful before concluding that international law requires us to do things which, as I say, appear either internally inconsistent or strategically naive.
It's been a real privilege having you on, Lord Wolfson, the Shadow Attorney General there. Quick thoughts from you before we go to our next break.
Every military operation I've done, there has to be a legal statement to it. You either get two sets of lawyers who will say no, 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 and lawyers who will say, I can see what you're trying to do, and this is the way to do it. And under international law, your treaties and conventions tend to be black and white. They're laid out. There's details there, and you've signed up to them. But this customary international law that Lord Wolfson talked about is up to interpretation, and it's interpretation from the country that is interpreting it. So Macron can turn around and say, I believe it's wrong. Albanese can say, I believe you're breaking international law from a French or from an Australian perspective, but not from an American perspective, because the Americans do that. There's a lot of wiggle room in it.
And this is, can I just remind everybody, if Macron's got a bee in his bonnet about whether it was internationally lawful to take out the Ayatollah, I'm pretty sure it was France who took out Colonel Gaddafi.
Well, yes.
Sort of led the...
it's up to interpretation. Up to interpretation,
but they were definitely at the. Well, we were as well, but they were definitely fairly.
And
played a central role to that.
And the French have supported a few other things around the world that we don't really want to talk about in there because it might upset the French. Let's upset the French.
I love the French, but maybe not Macron. Okay, right, we're going to be taking a short break now. When we come back, we're joined by our very own Samara Gill, who's been at another Reform press conference. That's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and welcome back. Just a couple of messages doing our housekeeping because a lot of you are asking very important things and I want to put some of these to Philip and then we're going to take a call. Then we'll be connecting with the lovely Samara. Hi, Alex and Phillips. Really glad Philip is on with you today. Me too. Fantastic and intelligent views. One thing that springs to mind, given you've just added to the long list of incompetences and failures of our useless Prime Minister, what if the Argentinians are watching what's going on? They'd surely be thinking this would be an optimal time for them to have a go at the Falklands. That's from Mandy.
It's very interesting indeed. And we put into context Starmer's slight surrender of Gibraltar as well. So if the Argentinians are going to go to the Falklands, they're not going to try something from a military perspective. They do not have the military ability to try and...
I also kind of feel like Milei's, take
the Falklands. Milei's sort of on side. But what they might do is try and manipulate the political decision to say, oh, let's come up with some other form of solution where you give us part ownership or a path to ownership or path to something, because Starmer seems to be up for that at the moment, and that's dangerous. But you're widening that question out. You've got Xi Jinping sitting there in the wings looking at what's going on with Taiwan and going, America's expending all its big missiles.
You can see the stockpiles of armaments running down, being depleted, and everyone being distracted. It's interesting, isn't it? Because when you look at the anti-Western alliance, the China, Russia, Iranian, and little old North Korea, the madcap elements.
The crink countries.
The crinklies, yeah. When you look at those, it's interesting, isn't it, that Russia currently engaged in conflict, Iran engaged in conflict.
North Korea supporting both.
North Korea supporting both, yeah, and whether, I don't think they necessarily sit there going, well, how about if you do this and you do this and we'll do this at the same time? But there's definitely going to be some degree of and
Xi Jinping will be sitting looking at it and will be making a decision. He'll have a go, no-go decision board saying, is this the optimal time to do it? When would be? Can the Americans respond? Can the rest of the world respond? What's the economic shock going to be? Can we survive that economic shock? He's been preparing for this. I'm worried.
Wow. Here's another very good question. It's not just the Muslim vote that Starmer's worried about. He's terrified of what would happen on Britain's streets if this country dared to take any kind of action against a Muslim country, regardless of how justified that action may be. Now, that is something that I fully agree with. I think that this is not just down to, oh, wow, look at what happened vote-wise in Gorton and Denton. Oh, my backbenchers might not like this. I think that there's another element in here. We know we've got 50,000 Islamists on the watch list. We know we have had porous borders for years now, and who knows who, representing hostile regimes and terrorist organisations, have broken into this country. We know that the IRGC have cells here. We know that they've even committed offensive actions. Is the worry now, you were saying to me earlier, that once the hot war starts to dwindle over there, the risk is it moves to domestic terrorism?
Yeah. Once the Iranians run out of conventional military capability, what they'll want to do is continue the disruption and political disruption. To do that, you want to attack the different countries that are reigning against you domestically so that they get tied up with that. The way to do that is through terrorism. The Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, the Quds Force, have got cells in countries all over Europe and all over the world, and will be in a position, they'll have already set the plans in place to stir up terrorist actions in those countries. And that is probably why, and I'm purely speculating here, the reason why the likes of Palestine Action were banned, because there were tentacles of influence coming in from IRGC Quds Force into Palestine Action that those at the front end of Palestine Action will know nothing about. They will not have realised that this is going on, because the Quds Force are fantastic at manipulating things the whole way through. And we see the naivety that there is in so many different communities across the country. They'll believe anything. We've seen the reaction over Israel and Gaza. They believe anything. And that level of disruption would be brought home domestically and would hit just about every person in this country.
I've always thought if you wanted to gather intel, groom, corral and create terrorist cells, then a great way of doing it is using social media and getting everyone marching behind a single banner.
Oh, they do.
It's I've never understood why we've continued to allow these Palestine marches to take place.
Well, and those that are coming illegally across the channel. We have got more individuals, more fighting-age men than there are in the whole of the armed services of the British military are in this country illegally.
I wonder if the same is true of France and Spain as well, who have also now sort of rode back from supporting America's offensive actions. Offensive, I mean, in a military sense. Right, let's speak to Stuart, who is in Belfast. Hello there, Stuart.
Hi, Alex. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm very well. How are you?
Listen, I understand, well, I don't understand our Prime Minister's bowing to international law, but surely we could make the case that the Iranian government are attacking the West in an asymmetric manner, where they're trying to sort of economically damage us, possibly invoke Article 5, and then you could get NATO to defend and maybe convoy ships, like we've done during the Second World War through the Straits of Hormuz, and that's really getting involved without really getting involved.
Yeah, it's interesting, actually, because, well, this is what Philip would call grey zone warfare, which is not necessarily just about kinetic force. It's not about bombs and guns and missiles. There's a heck of a lot that goes on in the cyberspace, in the economic space, indeed even with creating these mass exoduses of people to destabilise countries, with using the illegal immigration as an act of grey zone warfare. And this has been adopted by the crinks, for a long time.
Yeah, NATO I can put to one side because we're outside NATO's area of responsibility when it's getting down into the Middle East and everything else. But NATO members are being attacked and can come and work together. There have been the asymmetric attacks that you've discussed, the cyber and all the rest of it. But there's also the terrorism, as we mentioned just beforehand, that asymmetric. But we're also seeing direct attacks against our economy. The 190 attacks that there have been against international shipping in the Red Sea. We have a responsibility as a permanent member of the Security Council of the United Nations, as does Iran, as does France, as does the United States, as should Russia and China, in keeping international trade routes open. But we're seeing some of them supporting the actions that are disrupting that. Our economy is being deliberately targeted by kinetic action from a country that is sending its missiles to the Houthis and telling them where to fire them because they're providing the intelligence to do that. That's a direct attack.
It is. I couldn't agree more. Stuart, thank you ever so much for your call. OK, let us take a break now. There is so much more to discuss, so don't go anywhere. Make yourself a cup of tea and we're going to be here waiting for you on the other side.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and welcome back. Well, let's refocus our attentions on the naval aspect of what is going on here, because we heard, didn't we, rather belatedly, Sir Keir Starmer say, don't you worry, we're going to be sending warships over to defend Cyprus. Well, turns out that perhaps that is going to be rather tardy. It turns out that the Royal Navy ship HMS Dragon might not now set sail until next week. Meanwhile, a lot of the action seems to be happening on the high seas. Iran claims complete control of the Hormuz Strait. America has turned around and said, we will defend vital cargo along that maritime artillery so fuel can get to the parts of the world where it is most needed. Let's speak now to Tom Sharp, OBE, former Royal Navy commander. I mean, people have said to me for a long time, Tom, that when you look at the acts of hostile nations, when you look at the Belt and Road Initiative of China, when you look at Russia trying to seize places like Odessa, having already annexed Crimea in 2014, a lot of this comes down to control of maritime routes. We're seeing this again in this conflict. We've seen it already with the proxy, the Houthis, attacking cargo ships in the Red Sea. But what is so shocking to me seems to be the lack of naval preparedness here in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're an island nation. We depend on the sea for our survival. 90% of everything in your house arrived by sea, most of the energy. And yet we have always found selling the military and also the Navy as a sort of as a vote-worthy cause. We've always found that difficult unless we're at war. So this is what we're seeing today is an accumulation of 30 to 40 years worth of defense spending neglect. Decisions that prioritize land campaigns in the last few years, defense reviews that pare away capabilities and money, and so on and so on. So we have been wafer thin for a long while. Meanwhile, the current Navy is now trying to manage this, trying their best to manage this terrible deck of cards they've been handed, and it's playing out live through HMS Dragon.
One thing that Philip Ingram and I were trying to ascertain earlier is where the finger of blame should be pointed. Why is it that our battleships were not already present in that particular area when we knew America had sent assets there, when anyone following the news cycle or listening to the words coming out of Donald Trump's mouth could have anticipated there was going to be military action against Iran, and they had parked their vessels in the seas over there. So whose decision was it to keep us tethered up in Portsmouth, not in a state of preparedness, in a position, quite frankly, that has put the military men and women in Akrotiri at risk, defenceless?
Yeah, it's pretty painful. And of course, one of the root problems is that it's very hard to point the finger at one person and go, you're to blame. There's this whole sort of amorphous mass of decision making. You have the Navy in the ops center in Northwood. They would have known this. They would have known about preparing and planning and getting ships out the door early. The Americans do it all the time. We have forgotten how to do that, and it's not the Navy's fault. I'll come back to that. But so you have the Navy on the one hand, then you have the Joint Headquarters in Northwood, then you have the MOD in town, and then you have Number 10. And all it takes is for someone in that chain of decision making to sort of wring their hands and look at the state of the Navy we have, which, back to my original point, and go, do you know what? I think we should probably keep these back for a rainy day. And are so used to doing it, they can't even tell when it started raining. And so somewhere between the Navy going, we need to get out the door and be prepared for this, and the political decision making is just this complete failure to understand how navies work and the importance of them to our country.
Let me bring in Philip Ingram now, because you guys can talk shop together. But is there, I want to ask you both really, is there any sort of, let's start with Tom and then Philip, chip in whenever you want. Is there a risk to essentially, watching in slow motion United Kingdom military decision-making play out? Because our adversary will be looking at that going, oh, well, look, the boat's there, it's not there, it was going to set off, oh, look, there's all the stuff being loaded onto it, oh, it's not going to go right now, it's going to have to go on Monday, oh, there it goes. I mean, it's hardly the act of sort of sophisticated deception.
No, and this is what I find so frustrating. I mean, this is just one example. If you look at our lack of action against, say, the Dark Fleet, if we just cast our mind back to that, the Ukraine war, and remember that for a minute, we are single-handedly failing to take any action against them, whilst standing from the rooftops and saying we will. The say-do gap has never been wider. And the thing that's so frustrating is that the money we need now to reverse this decades-long decline. Okay, it's a lot of money and we'd have to find it from somewhere, but it's an awful lot less than the weakness we're portraying that leads to the conflict would then cost. And as Philip said earlier, we are under attack all the time, every day. This is not a future problem. Russia is attacking us every day in the cyber domain, under critical undersea infrastructure, and so on. And yet, we can't find it within ourselves to recognize that we just need to spend more money now and spend it better. That's a second order issue, but we need more money. We need to reverse this decline now. The conditions, the excuses have gone. The excuses of the last 30 years, in my view, have now gone. And yet the Treasury and the government are not reflecting that.
The Treasury and the government see the Ministry of Defence as a pool of money for them to dip into for all of their other little projects. But we've also got one of the biggest defence budgets that there is in Europe, and it's not being spent wisely. And you look at other states. The Poles are buying. They've got a smaller defence budget than we have. They don't have the nuclear deterrent, which takes a big chunk of ours. But they're buying 1,000 main battle tanks. They're buying 1,000 tracked artillery pieces. We don't have any tracked artillery pieces at the moment, and we're converting 143 Challenger 2 to Challenger 3. It's ridiculous, and we can't even get our ships out the door. This is wrong. We're not forward-leaning enough.
And France has just sent their aircraft carrier, and they have a frigate off the coast of Cyprus right now. And I mean, dare I say it, it's possible that pace was what led to our change of decision making at the very top. We've been embarrassed into this, rather like the US embarrassed us into boarding the Bella 1 as it went past Iceland. We would never have conducted that boarding. Wouldn't it be nice if we led this stuff occasionally, rather than being forced into it by other countries.
Yeah, I was going to sort of ask as a second question, but it's almost a pointless moot question, whether we should be backing America in defending the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, the answer is clearly yes, but can we?
Well, we do have, I mean, the answer to that is yes. It is very, very difficult. This is not the Bab el-Mandeb. This is the Houthi threat on steroids. And I know that the US and Israel are writing down an awful lot of their mobile missile launchers. But really, in terms of what they have in the maritime domain, they have barely turned up to volume 1, and yet the shipping has stopped. So we now know that that shipping appetite for risk is way lower than it was, let's say, in the tanker wars. They've virtually stopped. And this could cause a real problem in the next 7 days to 2 weeks. Prices are already volatile, but you can't just put destroyers in there and escort merchant vessels through, because A, it's too risky for the destroyers, and B, it might not work anyway. So but to your point about what else have we got, we sent our nuclear submarine, our one working nuclear submarine, back to my original point, that went past the region 2 weeks ago. That shouldn't have happened, and I said it at the time. That should have been stopped. It should have plugged into the Abraham Lincoln Task Group in the Gulf of Oman and stood by for this eventuality, because it was blatantly obvious. Now, you have to ring the Australians, who you're going to do some AUKUS work with, and say, mate, sorry, we're going to be a little bit late, but you'll understand. And they'd go, of course. So, and then the final part of this jigsaw is our aircraft carrier. So, all these plans have been presented by the Navy. None of them have been accepted.
Wow. The plans have all been presented by the Navy and then have been accepted, I assume, by the government.
They would need to be approved, ministerially approved, to enact, and they just don't do it for whatever reason, whether it's votes or I mean, that's a whole different rabbit hole, but they just don't do it.
We get our Minister of Defence, which is a Minister of State, but we get our senior admirals, generals, air marshals in there playing politics and playing politicians, and therefore trying to do the sort of things that they think will be politically acceptable. Instead of turning around and going, no, we're in uniform, we should be recommending what is militarily prudent to carry out. And when you don't do that, then making it very, very clear that you're going against our military advice. That's too blurred now.
But yeah, I mean, Tom, are you sort of also suggesting, though, that the military have said to the UK government, this is what we strongly recommend you do, and they're just going la, la, la?
No, sorry, the Navy have. And I want to make that distinction absolutely clear. It stops at the Maritime Ops Centre. You're now into the mess that Philip just described of the joint headquarters, who are trying to appease the main building on the 4th floor in the MOD. And now you've got the MOD, who are very answerable to the Secretary of State. Of course they are. I mean, that's not unreasonable. But you end up in this situation where everyone's playing guessing games, and we knew at some point the lack of very senior naval officers in dark blue uniform in these joint organisations, and was going to come and bite us. And this could be part of it. We don't have an Admiral Sir Henry Leach sort of storming into number 10 and going, get the submarine back, get the destroyer out the door now, and let's talk about the carrier. That's what should have happened, and it hasn't.
It's incredible. Tom Sharp, thank you ever so much. Wow. We're going to take a short break now. During that, I'm going to let all of that sort of sink in, let the dust settle in my head of what we have just discussed there. It also gives you time to do the same and then ping over your questions or give me a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number if you'd like to have a chat with us. It's your normal network rate. You can also send me a WhatsApp message on that number, 0344 499 1000. If you'd like to send a text message, it's 87222. Write the word talk before you text, and we'll see you in a moment.
The Green Party have won the Denton and Gorton by-election. Labour in third place.
Breaking news that Peter Mandelson has now been arrested. So Mandy and Andy have now both had their collars felt.
What would Andrew Loney tell them to do?
To come clean, be honest. And if Charles is complicit in this cover-up, which I believe he is, then I think he has to fall on his sword.
When you define sex, or gender or sex, what you mean is biological sex, and that's a man or woman, what you are physically, not what you think you are on a Wednesday afternoon.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, let us avert our eyes back to matters domestic politics for a moment here before we do a final hour. Again, no doubt dipping our toes in the boiling waters of international politics. And, of course, at 12 o'clock, we'll be having Prime Minister's questions, which we'll be taking live. I think that's going to be a particularly pugnacious session. Interesting to see the words that come out of Starmer's mouth during that and how truthful they may be. But there's been a Reform press conference again today, and our very own Samara Gill has been there. We can connect with her now. Hello, Samara. What was on the agenda for Nigel Farage and his crew?
You know, it was a really interesting press conference today, having Labour defectors like Sir Robin, who's just next to me in the building, saying some really interesting things that signal a sort of new wave for reform, especially in their London borough, or sort of the votes that they're trying to pick up here. It was very, very interesting. We discussed a lot about the grooming gangs with Layla Cunningham, the inaction of Sadiq Khan. There were words flung about him, left, right and centre. Also the dissatisfaction that the defectors had with Keir Starmer and how they can no longer recognise the Labour Party. It was seriously interesting stuff, and peppered in there was Nigel Farage giving his view on the world's events. But let's cross over to Sir Robin Wales now. I mean, this is a really interesting defection. What was sort of the final straw for you?
So I'll say again, we didn't defect from the Labour Party. The Labour Party left us. We stand by the values that we've had for a long time. We haven't changed those values. We left the Labour Party, we looked around and talked to reform, we thought, you know, we need a radical change. Not destroy everything, but a radical change, and we thought this was the right place to come. Yeah, I know everybody says they're racist, but of course they're not. That's just what the opposition tried to label them as.
You're not a defector.
I don't consider myself a defector. I consider myself somebody who's sensible and has looked at the reality. You asked what the last straw was. There are many last straws. I mean, the grooming gangs is a good example. Yeah, come on. We know that people were covering it up. They've got to be made to account. In London, there were grooming gangs running across the country while I was in London running Newham. And I want to know if we missed anything. I want to know, did we miss anything? Should we? What more could we have done?
Well, you were the mayor for a long time. Why wasn't there action on that?
Well, because we didn't see it. Nobody ever brought it up to us. We had no idea it was going on until it was very brave journalists actually revealed it. But that's why we want to review it. We want the whole thing out in the open. Let's find out what happened, find out any mistakes that were made. I don't think we made mistakes, but I'm always willing to listen. So that's an important issue. But to be honest, I think the whole Starmer government is gutless. They should have faced down their MPs, they didn't, and as a result, all the things that they should be doing, they're not doing. Starmer's Prime Minister to be Prime Minister. He's not Prime Minister to do anything. He's not Prime Minister to represent the people that I think we should represent, which is working people on low incomes. So I joined the Labour Party, but I was always to support working people on low incomes, and that's who's been left in the lurch. And I would say to anybody out there who's like that, have a really good look at reform. They're not the party that other people try to make them out to be, and I think myself and Clive Furness, who's the mayoral candidate in Newham, both think this is the right choice.
You and Clive had some very nice things to say about Nick Clegg, Tony Blair, even Boris Johnson. I mean, it's very common knowledge that the reform base does not trust these people. What would you say to that?
I didn't say very nice things there. I said Nick Gibb and the Tories did something.
Right, sorry, that's my bad.
That's not probably my accent. It's okay. I've misunderstood loads.
But Boris Johnson got some nice words.
Boris Johnson did some good stuff, but the reason he did some good stuff in London was he had some excellent people working with him. He gets to number 10 and he stops listening to anybody. And he was a disastrous Prime Minister, absolute disaster, the Boris wave and everything else. But as Mayor of London, he was not a bad mayor. We should be honest. We don't have to criticise everybody when they've done a good job. So he'd done an all right job. Blair, first 5 years, I think we should look at that and say that was very successful. Then we sent all the kids to university, then we went to Iraq, and then he made lots of mistakes. But give credit for the things that people do well and criticise them for the things that they do badly. We'd do a lot better in politics if we did that. So I'd just like to be honest.
A bit of forgiveness entering reform, I see. Look, I mean...
I never said I'd forgive anybody. I said I'd be honest about it. Come on.
Why Reform UK? I mean, what does it have to offer London voters that the Labour and Conservatives don't? I mean, Sadiq Khan is a behemoth candidate. You're taking him on. What are you going to offer?
Well, Clive Furness is taking on Newham, where we had 80% satisfaction level, most popular council in the country. Now it's 25%. That's what you get when you get a Corbynite, Starmerite sort of system there. I think Leila Cunningham's a very good candidate. I think what distinguishes her for me, she's dynamic and smart and daddy, all that. But what's really good about her is she listens. And she doesn't think she can do everything. She's going to get people in to make it run well, which is the model that will give us a better London. So we're happy to support her, very happy to support her. The reason reform, well, let's be honest, the Tories completely messed it up. Labour did that disastrous job. The Greens are out to lunch, and the Liberals haven't found a fence they couldn't sit on, or a log flume they can't go down. I mean, what do they actually stand for? None of them stand for anything, except the continuation of the current politics that aren't delivering the services people deserve. Reform have raised issues that nobody else has done. They're willing to talk and listen. They want to be radical. As I say, you don't just throw everything out. You're radical. You find out what services are being delivered, and we wrote a book, Left, Right, Wrong, about our time in Newham, about how to approach improving services. Our job after the election is going to be to go into councils, if reform wins some, because never take the electorate for granted, and if they win, we'll talk to them about how to deliver better services so we can demonstrate that it can work better.
Thank you so much.
My
Sir
pleasure.
Robin Wales, he's going to be a reformer now, but he hasn't defected. Don't get that.
I've always been a reformer.
There you go. Alex, back to you. That's the new look for reform.
Thank you very much. Yeah, interesting there to see that reform is sort of, they might not be big defections, it might not be, you know, on the same par as Robert Jenrick, but I think trying to demonstrate that they are, I suppose they might argue, a centrist party that attracts support from all corners of the political spectrum. Certainly, if they're wanting to break down barriers in the red wall, they will need Labour votes. But this, of course, was a press conference focusing on London, where they've already announced their mayoral candidate in the form of Leila Cunningham. That is not set to take place, the mayoral election for London, until 2027. But critical elections, of course, coming up locally as well around the country. Let us refocus now back on geopolitics, because there's something that Philip and I had been discussing amongst ourselves during an advert break. I posed a question to Philip, which I think is worth actually posing on air, so you get to also hear his reply. And that was, Philip, now that senior figures in the Iranian leadership have been taken out, we're seeing Iran throwing ballistic missiles and drones in all manner of directions. Is there a risk now that you're going to have inexperienced or more radical junior people of the regime in charge of those weapons stockpiles? And will that lead to chaos?
Yeah. The one thing that surprised me so far is the accuracy and the targeting that the Iranian missiles and drones have had. They've been pretty good, which is very surprising. But you're 100% right. As their military capability gets denuded, as their command and control is reduced. Their targeting accuracy is going to be reduced. But the next regime element that comes in, the next layer of command, is going to want to try and create as much disruption as possible. So they're going to start throwing things at anything and everything. So things are going to get much more dangerous across the Middle East and within missile range and drone range of where Iran is. Before then, once they lose that conventional military capability, them trying to stir up terrorist acts across the rest of Europe to cause disruption, to try and punish the West further.
The question is now, who is the person who is running the show in Iran, making the decisions, who's in charge of strategy, who the enemy is, who isn't, where they should be targeting?
It's the IRGC.
Right.
The IRGC will have a tight control. Now, they've lost their senior commanders at the minute, but like any military organisation, you take the person out of the top, there is always someone underneath them who's ready to step in. You've already practiced that. And it's such a big organisation to try and get down so many layers where you've got to, the individual who goes, I'm not doing this anymore, let's surrender or let's just disappear. We've got a long way to go before that happens.
Have we got a long way to go before either side runs out of armaments? Because there's been a lot of comparing. Well, you know, the average Shahed drone is about £25,000, $35,000 to put together. The missiles being used by, let's say, the Western or Gulf states to intercept these drones, some of them are worth up to 1.5 million. You know, the scalability is a big question. Right, so the scale, I mean, people are saying, well, America, how many Tomahawk missiles do they have? How many have they used already? I think one of the other big questions has been on the missile launch. Yeah. I don't know, the equipment itself. You know, I understand that some of the Gulf states are screaming out saying, we've used these, but we need more, we need more. And, you know, is there a possibility that Iran's going to not spend all of its supply first, and that could happen?
Possibly, but you know, the more sophisticated the missile, the longer it takes to manufacture, the more expensive it is, and the fewer we've got of them. So something to destroy a missile when it's in the air is really expensive. We don't have many of them, and therefore you don't want to destroy the missiles after they've been launched. You want to destroy them whilst they're in their depots. That's where they're being hit, and you want to destroy the launches that can get them in the air. If you can't get them in the air, then they're no threat whatsoever, and that's where the American focus is going to be. There's a finite number of Tomahawk cruise missiles and Patriot missiles and everything else. The Patriots that shoot the ballistic missiles down the Tomahawk cruise, accurately targeting down to you choose which window pane you want to fly it through. It's that sort of level of accuracy. The different sites, but there's almost an endless supply of even smart bombs that can be dropped by the B-1 Lancer bomber, the B-2 stealth bomber, and others. So there's different layers of ammunition that can take things out. It's doing it accurately reduces the collateral damage. Right. The more you have to go for the good old dumb bombs, the greater danger there is for collateral damage and civilian casualties and all the rest of it.
Now, quickly before we go to break, an Iranian ballistic missile heading into Turkish airspace after passing Syria and Iraq was destroyed by NATO air and missile defence systems in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. That's according to the Turkish Defence Ministry. It said in a statement there were no casualties or injuries, adding Turkey reserves the right to respond to any hostile actions against it. Things are heating up. Things are going to heat up as well in the House of Commons because it's Prime Minister's questions starting at 12 o'clock. We'll be crossing over to the Palace of Westminster live just after this. I'll see you soon.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the show. Now, we are soon to be crossing over live to the Houses of Parliament because it's that time of the week where it's Prime Minister's questions, and one assumes this is going to be a pretty spicy one, given everything going on geopolitically and some of the condemnation of our Prime Minister, certainly by Donald Trump, for, well, not exactly being Winston Churchill. Here to guide us through, still with me, of course, is the brilliant Philip Ingram, who can analyse everything from a defensive point of view, and our very own political guru, Peter Cardwell. It's going to be, I think, a lively session, isn't it, Peter?
Absolutely, and it'll be interesting to see whether it's the defence angle, whether it's the morality angle in regard to Iran, whether it is Kemi Badenoch talking about the Prime Minister having a backbone. They also, maybe even a first question saying, would the Prime Minister agree that he's no Churchill? Something as pithy as that. We've seen Kemi Badenoch do that before. I wouldn't be surprised if she does something like that today.
Now, one thing Philip and I have been talking about is Starmer's been very abjectly clear that we were not involved whatsoever in this offensive action against Iran, but we are going to allow America to use certain shared assets in defensive action. But one thing that Philip had said was, well, you know, the interconnection of intelligence sharing systems and assets is so convoluted that might not be truthful. Tell us more, Philip.
Well, exactly. And this is where Starmer's language has been very careful. And what he's trying to leave the British public's impression is that it's all about whether we're sending aircraft and missiles to attack into Iran. The reality is, we will almost certainly have had to, in some way, be supporting the planning for that action and knowing what was going to happen. And it's the use of that information, the use of that intelligence, and your British assets that would be part of it, or shared assets and everything else, is tantamount to being directly involved in the action. So he's misleading the British public at best, lying at worst.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because then would that actually amount to telling fibs to Parliament, which has a very different...
Or just a version of the truth, necessarily, but that sophistication of what Philip has just said, I haven't heard that from a government minister, and we're now in day 5, so very interesting. And they're not going to volunteer that information unless it's prized out of them. I wonder if Kemi Badenoch will do that.
Yeah, interestingly as well, we were speaking earlier on to former Royal Navy Commander Tom Sharp, who had basically suggested that the Royal Navy have been saying to the government, move those ships. That submarine that's on its way out to the Pacific Ocean, it needs to stop in the theatre in the Middle East, and that they've essentially put their fingers in the ears and gone la la la. Astonishing accusation there, I thought.
Well, the thing is that so many people say Donald Trump is unpredictable, and in many ways he is, but when it comes to military action, he said, look, Venezuela, we're going to affect regime change. He said, you know, about a week ago, in the next 10 to 15 days...
And put the warships there.
Exactly. I mean, he follows through with things militarily anyway, so this should have taken... Certainly Iran's response, I think, took a lot of people by surprise, but the fact that this happened and Iran got bombed, I'm not sure it's that much of a surprise, really, especially when the president says, we're going to do this, and when Donald Trump says everything, you listen.
Right, it is time to cross over to the Palace of Westminster. Here's PMQs.
Mr. Speaker, can I pay tribute to our brave servicemen and women in the Middle East during this very difficult period? Our bases in Cyprus and Bahrain have now been attacked. The US has taken offensive action to destroy missile launch sites to defend British territory. Why will the Prime Minister not allow the RAF to do the same?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, can I make clear this is obviously an extremely serious situation, and I know the whole country is worried about the potential for escalation. Right. They're worried about the impact on their lives, particularly when they see what's happening with energy. The family and friends of those who are caught in the region will be worried sick about them. And of course, we've got civilians and military personnel at risk in the region. We need to act, therefore, with clarity, with purpose, and with a cool head. The protection of UK nationals is our #1 priority. And we're taking action to reduce the threat, with planes in the sky in the region, intercepting incoming strikes, deploying more capability to Cyprus, and allowing US planes to use UK bases to take out Iran's capability to strike. What I was not prepared to do on Saturday was for the UK to join a war unless I was satisfied there was a lawful basis and a viable, thought-through plan. That remains my position.
That wasn't the question I asked him. Nobody wants to see an escalation. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, our bases, in case they don't realise, our bases have already been attacked. Iran is trying to kill our servicemen and women. He is catching arrows rather than stopping the archer. That's what we're talking about. Why is he asking our allies to do what we should be doing ourselves? We are, I would say to Labour MPs, we are in this war whether they like it or not. What is the Prime Minister waiting for?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, let me give a little more detail, because for a number of weeks now we've been pre-deploying our capabilities to the region. In doing so, we've been liaising very closely with the United States, as the House would have expected. Therefore, radar systems were pre-deployed, ground-based air defence was pre-deployed, counter-drone systems were pre-deployed, and F-35 jets were pre-deployed. Mr. Speaker, that is why, since Saturday morning, multiple F-35s and Typhoons have been in operation not just in the Middle East, but across Cyprus. Further missions were flown overnight, Typhoons defending in particular Qatar, and F-35s defending other regional parties. We're resupplying our air defence missiles today. Wildcat helicopters with anti-drone capabilities will be in Cyprus this week, and HMS Dragon will be deployed to the Mediterranean. And of course, in agreement with the ES, they're using our bases to conduct the operations to strike Iranian missiles and launchers. Mr. Speaker, that is the action that we are taking. That is the agreement that we've reached with the United States to protect our nationals.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has read out a long list. It is not enough. He says that we are pre-deploying. The one ship which we are sending, HMS Dragon, is still in Portsmouth. The fact is the Type 45s cannot take out incoming missiles. This is not enough. He's read out a long list. The people who understand know it is not enough. He should be doing more. Yesterday, the Chancellor could have given more money to defence. Instead, I don't know why they're laughing. I don't know why that's funny. Yes, not funny. Yesterday, the Chancellor could have given more money to defence. Instead, she gave more money for welfare. Their priorities are all wrong, Mr. Speaker. Their priorities are all wrong. They can chanter as much as they like. The fact of the matter is that the war in Iran is happening now.
Order. Mr. Bailey, I don't like that. I don't think it becomes you either. An officer and a gentleman, I expect more. Come to bed,
The fact of the matter, Mr. Speaker, is that the war...
I can lip read as well. So please, let's learn something. If not, you'll learn the way out. Come to bed.
Mr. Speaker, the country is not going to be distracted by Labour MPs moaning. The fact of the matter is that the war in Iran is happening now. But the OBR say the government won't hit 3% on defence for 5 years. The war is happening now. There is no urgency from the Prime Minister. Why is he leaving the job of funding our armed forces to the next government?
Prime Minister.
I'm not going to take lectures on defence from the party opposite. They came into office, and what did they do? They cut the defence budget. They missed army...
Order. Mr. Phillips, you've moved from there to there. You're even louder here, so I think twice.
Prime Minister. Not only did they cut the defence budget, they missed army recruitment targets every year for 14 years. They left morale in our armed forces at an all-time low, and our forces hollowed out. That's the words of Ben Wallace, the former Defence Secretary. Labour, by contrast, is delivering the biggest boost to defence spending since the Cold War. £270 billion over this Parliament. And we're doing that because we're focused on what matters. And she's right. The war is, of course, happening now. We have to focus on that. Across the country, people are worried about those that are trapped in the region. And, Mr. Speaker, that is why we're taking action. And I can update the House. That yesterday more than 1,000 British nationals arrived back in the UK on commercial flights from the UAE. A further 8 flights are due to leave the UAE to the UK today. I can confirm, Mr. Speaker, that the first charter flight is expected to leave Oman later today, and 2 more will come in the coming days. The country really does want to know this. I'm sorry. Family and friends are worried sick about people who are caught out. I will not be put on. I can announce, Mr. Speaker, we will lay on additional charter flights in coming days. British Airways are now laying on an extra flight from Oman, and the Foreign Secretary will have further discussions today. And can I urge all those in the House who have constituents who are caught in this to make sure that they do register their presence so we can do whatever we can to help them get home safely.
Mr. Speaker, I wasn't asking about evacuations. I was asking about defence spending. He needs to focus on the question he's being asked, not the statement that was prepared in the bunker. He stands there telling us that he's spending more money on defence. They're saying it. No, he isn't. In fact, they are cutting defence spending by £2.6 billion from the MOD budget this year. And that's why there are no Royal Navy warships in the Middle East, Mr. Speaker. In June last year, he should ask his Defence Secretary for the numbers, because that is what's happening. In June last year, Mr. Speaker, the government promised that its plan for funding our armed forces would be ready by autumn. In autumn, they promised it would be ready by the end of 2025. It is March 2026, and still nothing. So can the Prime Minister tell the House when his defence investment plan will finally be published?
Prime Minister.
Well, I'm sorry she's not interested in how people caught in the region are going to get home. I think for the vast majority of people watching this PMQs, that'll be the single most important thing on their mind. They cut defence spending, we're increasing defence spending. And we're doing that, Mr. Speaker, because we've stabilised the economy. Yesterday, the Chancellor announced inflation was down, interest rates down, borrowing down, debt down, investment, living standards growth up. Now, I know the Leader of the Opposition doesn't understand that. The Shadow Chancellor clearly doesn't understand that, although I do have to thank him that in what's been a very difficult week, he provided some excellent unintended stand-up comedy in his response to the Chancellor yesterday.
Mr. Speaker, he doesn't want to talk about the defence investment plan because he doesn't know. He doesn't know what is going on any policy, so he reads statements that are pre-prepared irrespective of the question, and the whole country can see it. The truth is that because they spent money on welfare, there is no defence investment plan. Because there is no defence investment plan, they are not ordering enough missiles. The fact is that this crisis goes beyond defence spending. They can chant as much as they like. They are pathetic, spending money on welfare instead of defence spending. Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. They're not just pathetic, they are also weak. This crisis goes beyond defence spending. It is also about the cost of living. This war is interrupting the supply of oil and gas. That is driving up the cost of petrol and making it more expensive to heat our homes. Yet he is stopping drilling in the North Sea while importing the same oil and gas from Norway. Does he think that at a time of geopolitical crisis, it makes sense to kill our oil and gas industry and give up that ready supply of energy?
Well, the question of the energy supply right now is a serious question, and we are doing all we can with allies to make sure that that is preserved. And it's vital that we keep trade flowing through the Straits of Hormuz, Mr. Speaker. The Energy Secretary met the International Energy Agency yesterday, and the Chancellor is meeting oil and gas companies today. We're keeping in close contact with our allies and key industry players. Again, I think the country wants to know what we're doing now in relation to what's happening in coming days. Mr. Speaker, oil and gas will be part of our energy mix for many years to come. But if Ukraine and the last few days have taught us anything, it is that all the time we're on the international market, we are vulnerable to these changes. That is why renewable energy, where we have our independence and security, would take us off those markets and give us the security that we need.
Speaker, the Prime Minister again does not understand the energy transition. You do not need to stop drilling in oil and gas to get renewables. This is basic stuff. He doesn't understand his policy. He's got a sea of orcs and goons who have no idea how anything is working at all. Mr. Speaker. They can complain all they like, Mr. Speaker. The fact is, they are letting down the people out.
Order. You can't do a point of order in the middle of Prime Minister's question.
Mr. Speaker.
Ask my question.
You don't listen to the questions anyway.
Mr. Speaker, the situation in Iran shows this Prime Minister has the wrong priorities. When it comes to defence, it's someone else's job. When it comes to welfare, they find the money. When our bases are attacked, they call the lawyers. When our energy security is under threat, they stop drilling in the North Sea. Mr. Speaker, the truth is, or in fact, Mr. Speaker, after last week's by-election, isn't the truth that he is, they might not like to hear it, but they are going to hear it, Mr. Speaker, whether they like it or not. Is it not the truth that he is prioritising his job security over our national security?
Mr. Speaker, I spent the week protecting British lives and our national interest. And Mr. Speaker, moments like this define a leader of the opposition. They can either step up, act in the national interest and show that they're fit to be Prime Minister, or they can expose their utter irrelevance. She has chosen the second.
This is already an extremely pugnacious and punchy Prime Minister's questions, as we expected. A lot of deflection coming from the Prime Minister, it seems. I personally felt that when he started talking about interest rates down, growth, it to me felt tone deaf, considering we're now in a situation, just as he was saying that, there was a news flash coming up that RAF jets had to intercept more incoming kinetics into Cyprus.
The slowing of inflation is important, but irrelevant in the conversation today. Really, anything other than defence, other than what's happening in Iran, at Prime Minister's questions is irrelevant. Even, I would say, Kemi Badenoch talking about the welfare bill, which is a massive issue. We should talk about it, absolutely. But today, the first opportunity to talk about what's happening in Iran from a British perspective to the Prime Minister asking really difficult questions. I think the testiest exchange right at the end there, where Kemi Badenoch said he's prioritising his job security over our national security. He hit back and said moments like this define a leader of the opposition. That was pretty brutal. That's as brutal as it got. But lots of moments in this where it was deflecting, where Keir Starmer was asked very direct questions about, for example, the defence budget that he couldn't answer. He didn't know when that review is coming out and reporting. So I think he was not as bad as I've seen him, but nonetheless pretty weak today. He was trying to speak slowly, speak clearly and be statesmanlike. Kemi Badenoch asking, I thought, pretty good questions, but both of them...
Vital questions,
yes,
some might
absolutely.
say.
Both of them, I think, were not at their best today.
Now, Philip, at one point your eyebrows shot up so high I thought they were going to be the second moon landing. What was your biggest take from that PMQ so far?
Well, a couple of things came out. First of all, he turned around and said that we've known about what the Americans are doing. We've been planning our response for weeks and weeks and weeks. Well, why wasn't there a Royal Navy ship there that can track 1,000 targets at the same time? He tried to say that there had been ground-based radar put out. The ground-based radar did not identify the drone that hit Cyprus and landed in there. Did nothing to be able to deal with it. The question that Kemi Badenoch asked about the Chancellor's statement and more money for defence to get the procurement that's needed for the immediate systems that are going to need to protect Cyprus and all the rest of it, you need an urgent operational requirement. That's in your money. The Chancellor a few days ago said that she's going to give more money to buy new medium helicopters. That's outside the Defence Investment Plan. That's to keep jobs going in Yeovil. Well, that should be part of a Defence Investment Plan. But urgent operational requirements, the Prime Minister himself turned around and held the Ukrainian anti-drone drones that are being made in the UK and said, this is what we're asking the Ukrainians to help us with all of this. That needs money today. Yeah. That should have been allocated by the Chancellor to deal with these urgent operational requirements, and she could have made a public statement about that, saying we're going to take it out of a contingency fund so that we can protect British interests. None of that's come out.
He could have done a lot more preparation a lot sooner. Instead he said, frigate, I'll not bother.
Yeah.
Love that line. Right, we're going to take a very quick break, but don't go anywhere. More analysis, more from PMQs, a lot to talk about. We'll see you very, very shortly.
The Green Party have won the Denton and Gorton by-election. Labour in third place.
Breaking news that Peter Mandelson has now been arrested. So Mandy and Andy have now both had their collars felt.
What would Andrew Loney tell them to do?
To come clean, be honest. And if Charles is complicit in this cover-up, which I believe he is, then I think he has to fall on his sword.
When you define sex, what your gender or sex, what you mean is biological sex, and that's a man or woman, what you are physically, not what you think you are on a Wednesday afternoon.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Now, if I didn't have much confidence in the government before today, I must admit it's at rock bottom today. There's some breaking news before we focus our attention back on PMQs, and that is that 3 men aged 39, 43 and 68 have been arrested in London and Wales on suspicion of spying for China. Quelle surprise, Philip. But I've just read something, gentlemen, which some breaking news on the Times, which has actually caught my breath in the back of my throat. One analyst has said that this war threatens to set off a worse oil supply crisis than we've ever seen, outstripping the Arab oil embargo of 1973. Iran has never shut down the Strait of Hormuz before, and this analyst has said if this lasts for more than a week, it will be epochal. Now, if I was Kemi Badenoch, one thing I'd be saying is, OK, Strait of Hormuz is shut, oil and gas fields blown up. We normally get LNG from Qatar. They're not making it or exporting it. How are we going to keep the lights on?
It's an absolutely fundamental question. about 20% of that coming across there. It's really about that sense of free movement on the Strait of Hormuz to make sure that that gets to us and gets to other countries as well. And if it gets more expensive for us, it's going to get more expensive for others too. This is certainly something I think that will land at Donald Trump's door. Many people will talk to him about it, and it also re-emphasises the nonsense of net zero and the thought that we're not drilling for oil, or those oil and gas licences aren't happening in the North Sea as well. So Kemi Badenoch did touch on that a little bit at PMQs, but perhaps she could have gone a lot further.
Yeah, it does seem to me that both of them are still sort of slinging political mud at each other, and what we need right now is a sensible, critical and urgent conversation, because this is a hot war. I've just listed all the countries already embroiled in this. Of course, Israel, the United States, we've been dragged into it via Cyprus, France and Greece as well, the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Jordan, Cyprus, Turkey. The list goes on. This is already escalating into something pretty big, potential economic collapse, potential fuel crisis, and they're playing games.
They are playing games, and we look at the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the world's liquid natural gas comes through there. 20 to 25% of the world's oil comes through there. America's sitting happy because it produces everything it needs to domestically itself. But the impact that we're seeing across the board is phenomenal. The majority of the stuff going through Straits of Hormuz goes into Southeast Asia, goes to China. Therefore, manufacturing out of China and all the rest of it, they're going to prioritise domestic market rather than international market. That's going to put the supply of goods and the price of goods up across the rest of the world that there is there. And we are not filling that up. And we're already seeing that in parts of the United Kingdom. We've just seen a hike of 25% of heating oil in Northern Ireland, part of the United Kingdom. And then we've got other politicians playing games like Michelle O'Neill refusing to get briefed on what is going on, whilst we're seeing the people of Northern Ireland have to pay 25% more. That's going to come through the rest of the United Kingdom in the coming days and the coming weeks.
If I'm allowed a tiny plug, the Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland, Emma Little Pengelly, will be on my show tonight at 7 o'clock.
Oh, always one to take an opportunity, aren't you, Cardwell? But what is interesting here is looking to me at the emerging geopolitical networks, because we first of all had over the weekend Mark Carney sounding rather supportive of Donald Trump, where Sir Keir Starmer sort of kicks off going, we're worried about the legality of this. Oh, it's his shtick, isn't it? Carney's now gone to Australia, and both him and Albanese are now going international law. But now Macron's doing the same. Now Pedro Sanchez is doing the same. And it seems to be isolating Donald Trump rather than the West coming together to say Iran is an evil entity. We know that. We have observed this since October the 7th. Well, we were talking about this earlier. So many attacks by the IRGC. The West's response to this, I'm finding dangerously fractured. And what's alarming me is it seems to me the conductor of the anti-Trump orchestra is our Prime Minister.
The world order is changing dramatically. The thought that even de facto you have so many of those Arab countries that, okay, the Abrahamic Accords went really well, were a fantastic feat in many ways of diplomacy. Then the Gaza war meant that places like Saudi Arabia pulled back from supporting Israel. Now they're essentially, de facto anyway, supporting them again because they're being attacked by Iran. You're either with Iran or you're not. But the question I would have for Carney and for Albanese and for others as well is, how many questions did you ask about the illegality of massacring 40,000 people?
Or the illegality of the Houthis attacking cargo, or the illegality of Hezbollah and funding terrorism, or the illegality of attacks of the IRGC on our home soil.
And the other thing is, if you look at a lot of the different countries that are out there and their domestic political situation, just look at Macron in France. It's a complete and utter basket case at the moment. And therefore what a lot of them are doing is they're making comments that are aimed at their domestic audience, but they're using the international geopolitical situation to make those comments, because what they don't want is riots on the streets, further disruption. That's going to focus them, that's going to take more of their money, going to take more of their political capital. And this is where it's getting very dangerous, because the likes of Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping will be sitting there and stirring those little pots in the information domain, and we're already seeing huge amounts of disinformation coming out, continue to stir those pots.
But for those politicians, they can very easily just say, look, isn't it all Trump's fault? Look, if Trump bad, I'm good, I'm trying to help here, but actually these are forces beyond our control.
Oh gosh, the faux moral outrage of the performance politics. It's a risk of imperiling the entirety of Western civilization right now. And I'm not even being hyperbolic. Right, we're going to be taking a short break. Don't go anywhere, because there's still a lot more to discuss. Put the kettle on, would ya? I'll see you soon.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Now, it seems to me that increasingly we are having a situation where international politics and domestic politics are becoming very much more interconnected, at least at the ballot box, than they ever have been before. And perhaps that is what we saw play out in the by-election in Gorton and Denton, when, of course, the Green Party soared to victory, an astonishing insurgence, really, and that party now in polling, second to Reform, overtaking the Labour Party. Let's speak to Martin Abrams, who's the Green Party councillor. I mean, Martin, what do you think is behind your sudden skyrocketing to such a prominent position in national politics?
I mean, because the Green Party is standing up for working class people, and we're the only party to be doing that. We're talking about things like inequality, we're talking about things like the cost of living, and we're talking, you know, brutally honestly about why that is happening and the extraction of wealth by millionaires and billionaires, which is absolutely bringing this country to its knees. And, you know, that sort of clear messaging really resonates with people. And we're the only party that is doing that and not scapegoating, you know, the most vulnerable people in our society, you know, migrants and refugees, which, you know, Reform, Conservatives and the Labour Party are just doing on a daily basis.
In terms of clear messaging, in the Gorton and Denton by-election, your party put out various campaign materials and videos in foreign languages, in Urdu, for example, and they weren't necessarily about uplifting the working classes. A lot of that was about Gaza. You even had pictures of Narendra Modi. You were pandering, some might say, to an Islamist, as in political Islamic agenda for the migrant community there. That doesn't seem to be representing the intentions and the attitudes of all of the UK working class. Does that represent UK interests?
Well, I mean, I've kind of reject that question, to be honest, Alex.
Well, no, you can't reject the question. The question is, it was true. Your campaign materials in Gorton and Denton, in some instances, were put out in Urdu. There is video of this being about Gaza. Look, that is not a fabrication. We all saw that.
Alex, every single party tries to engage with the communities where they're trying to get their votes during elections. Every single party has an example of putting out literature, putting out party political broadcasts in different languages. Okay? The Green Party talks about genocide in Gaza because that's what people care about. People care about genocide. And it's not just in Muslim communities, it is across the board. So we're talking about it consistently, and we're the only party to call a genocide a genocide. None of the other three parties that were contesting that election dare call it that, because they are just in cahoots with people like Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu that are taking us and dragging the UK into another illegal war into Iran. You know, the Green Party is absolutely standing up for things that people care about. And that's why we absolutely smashed that election, got a 4,000 majority, got Labour to come third in what was apparently a two-horse race. And we've now got our fifth MP in Parliament in Hannah Spencer, you know, a local plumber who speaks clearly and passionately about the things that clearly the voters in Gorton and Denton care about.
But you sailed to success, some would argue, or I think it's numerically, statistically evidential, off the back of a consolidated Muslim vote. There have been accusations of so-called family voting. Your deputy leader, Mohsen Ali, was present at what appears to be a pro-Iranian regime march the other day. Are you confident that your politics is not pandering to, frankly speaking, people who don't have the UK's interests at heart, who have sympathies with the terrorist regime in Iran?
I mean, it's utterly bizarre that you're coming out with this, Alex.
What's bizarre about what I've said?
It's bizarre because you're creating dog whistle arguments about why people voted for the Green Party. Our leader is a gay Jewish man. Okay, your dog whistle politics would not suggest that these hardline conservative Muslims would vote for a gay Jewish man. But you know what happened in Gorton in Denton is people from all communities came out and voted for a local plumber in Hannah Spencer that talk about things very clearly about things that people care about.
Answer my question, because I'm the one saying to you, you're inverting this discussion now, and I just want to have a candid discussion with you. That is what we're doing here, which is your deputy leader, Mohsin Ali, attended what appears to be a pro-Iranian
It
march.
was a Stop the War coalition and a campaign for nuclear disarmament demonstration against an illegal war in Iran. Okay? That is not a demonstration supporting the regime in Iran in any way, shape or form.
So you would turn around and say that you would agree that the regime in Iran is a terrorist regime, poses a threat, not just the United Kingdom, but frankly sponsoring terrorism around the world.
Listen, I'm not going to come on here and make plaudits about the Iranian regime.
Well, I'm asking you to, because as your party has courted the Muslim vote, right, and this is the hot topic of today, I think it's important. No, I'm asking the question. I think it's important. Can you please just pause a moment?
I answer them.
No, I'm asking this again. Let me break it down. Let me break it down very clearly. And I will wait for your answer, which is how an interview works. Okay.
Yeah, you've got to let me answer them, not interrupt me. Please don't interrupt.
I didn't. It is important that we understand from your party, you're second in the polls. We saw in Gorton and Denton that you have courted the Muslim vote, that numerically this got you over the line. Okay. What I am asking you is, if you want to play in national politics, and currently you're second in polling, we need to understand what your foreign policy positions are. And so I asked you a very direct and simple question, which is the Green Party in support of the position that Iran is a terrorist regime? Yes or no?
Listen, Iran is a despotic authoritarian regime that has been attacked illegally by what I would describe as another terrorist regime, Israel, supported by the US. And the UK is now getting dragged into that by Keir Starmer allowing the US to use our military bases to launch these horrific attacks on what is a sovereign nation in Iran. And, you know, you're kind of out of step with public opinion here on talkTV, Alex, because the vast majority of people in this country are completely against the war in Iran. You know, the fact that we could be dragged into another illegal war, which would make the Iraq war look like a walk in the park, a country of 93 million people teetering on the verge of becoming a failed state. Alex, let me ask you this. Where do you think millions of refugees will head if Iran becomes a failed state?
Which regime do you think has enabled much of the grey zone mass exodus which has been taking place over the past few years? And are you concerned that some of those who may be supporting you as a result of your rhetoric, as a result of some of your campaigning materials, are you concerned that some of them may not have the UK's interests at heart, instead might have as their primary concern their own community's issues at heart?
I mean, this is becoming a bit of a laughable
I don't think it's funny. Alex. I think it's scary. That's why I'm asking you.
No, it is terrifying. You are absolutely right. Because, Alex, I've heard you on this show beat the drum, anti-migrant rhetoric, anti-refugee rhetoric.
It's not anti-migrant and it's not anti-refugee. It is anti-open borders, but continue.
For someone who seems to hate refugees and migrants so much.
How dare you? How dare you? Listen, you don't get to come on my show and say that I am anti-refugee. You are trying to deflect from answering a question when I'm asking you. You have a responsibility to be accountable to the general public. If you're polling second in national polls, we want to know what your relationship is when it comes to sections of the Muslim community who may have Islamist interests. That is what I'm asking you. That is what I want you to address. That, I think, is critically important. Don't try and turn this around against me. I was asking you whether you are confident that your supporters all have the UK's national interests at heart, or if there is a risk that they are prioritising, I'm talking about sectarian politics here, if they are prioritising their community's interests at heart, and if you are playing to this by putting out campaigning materials in foreign languages and invoking an emotive reaction to international wars.
I mean, OK, so in Gorton and Denton, Hannah Spencer, a white working class plumber who loves greyhounds, absolutely smashed Matt Goodwin and the Labour Party candidate with an absolutely thumping 4,000 majority. The Green Party is led by a gay Jewish man, and you are seemingly linking the fact that the Green Party is mobilising support of Islamists and this kind of dog whistle politics.
Are you mobilising support of Islamists?
I mean, absolutely not. We are mobilising the support of people that want to see a bit of hope and a bit of change in our politics, because the trust in British politicians at the moment is in the absolute gutter, mostly because they keep dragging us into illegal wars. They keep lying. They keep saying they're going to do one thing and then do another. What? And let me just finish on this, Alex, OK? Because Nigel Farage and people like Keir Starmer, they're coming out with, and Kemi Badenoch, they're constantly coming out with this rhetoric about refugees. OK, and I've already mentioned, OK, for people that seemingly hate refugees in those politicians, OK, they seem to love creating them. And this illegal war in Iran could potentially create a refugee crisis in Europe like we have never seen before. And people like you and people like them do not have any answer to that at all. I want to see a world, and the Green Party wants to see a world that respects international law, that respects peace. And what we've got at the moment is people beating the drum for war, supporting, horrific countries like Israel, where their prime minister is wanted for war crimes in Gaza because of the genocide that is still ongoing over there. He's now desperately trying to launch a war against Iran to expand Israel into a greater Israel. And Donald Trump, who is trying to distract from the Epstein files, is fully supportive of them. And the consequences of this do not seem to be realised at all. And I'm absolutely proud to represent a party that stands up for international law and order, that stands up for peace, and does not want to be a part of waging illegal wars like we're seeing at the moment, where energy prices are going to go through the roof, creating an inflation crisis again, like we've never seen before.
Indeed.
And it's absolutely crazy that people are supporting this.
Energy prices are going through the roof, and yet we can't access our own fossil fuels, so we could be at the sharp end of that. Why did you have Narendra Modi in your campaign material?
Because he's an authoritarian leader. We want to.
What's that got to do with UK politics?
Well, because Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, seems to be very comfortable with shaking the hands of these authoritarian leaders like Benjamin Netanyahu, like Narendra Modi.
And you think that saying that and putting that in campaign material has nothing to do with dog whistling to an Islamist vote? Completely separate?
No, not at all.
How old are you, Martin?
It's something that political parties do all the time. They link political leaders to people of an authoritarian bent. Okay, Narendra Modi has committed horrific crimes against humanity. Benjamin Netanyahu is a wanted war criminal, and we take no shame in saying that the Prime Minister should not be shaking the hands that are dripping with the blood of millions of people.
How old are you, Martin?
Well, that's a very personal question, Alex. I'm 45.
OK, I'd have thought you'd have graduated beyond Fisher-Price politics by now. Thank you ever so much for joining the programme. Philip, I find it astonishing when I listen to some of these arguments. They're saying, oh, we're dog whistling, oh, we're dangerous. And they're talking about blood dripping off hands, genocide, authoritarian leaders, putting out campaign materials in foreign languages. And they're saying, no, we're the peaceniks.
Yeah, he's using politics to stir emotion. and using a platform to stir emotion. And he keeps quoting international law. What international law have the Americans broken? What international law has anyone broken? It's the interpretation on what the Americans do in the attack into Iran is an American interpretation. So he is not in a position, and certainly not as someone who's representing a party that has just won a local election. The Gorton and Denton, they've got no say in what goes on in global politics whatsoever. He didn't quote what international law has been broken. He's quoting an opinion to stir up nothing but emotion.
In a constituency, in a city where we have seen an attack on a synagogue, where we have seen thwarted terrorist attacks.
Well, we know that the population that he was trying to target with all of these comments, with all of this emotion, was traditionally Labour supporting, but it was Labour supporting because they thought the Labour Party represented that element of their ethnicity in a way against the government, and therefore this is a protest vote against them. And
it's a dangerous protest vote.
It's a very dangerous protest vote. And if you look at their policies the whole way through, and you look at what they say and you look at what they do, everything contradicts itself across the board.
It's babyish, it's puerile, but unfortunately I think it's extremely dangerous. It's not even, I think it's willfully naive. Very interesting breaking news now. But what a day today, Phil. Wait for this. I said earlier on we had some breaking news that 3 people had been arrested in London and in Wales for spying for China. The partner of a sitting Labour MP is among 3 people arrested on suspicion of spying for China.
I'm not surprised.
Security services are investigating foreign interference in UK democracy, including attempts to obtain information on policy making and interfere with sovereign affairs. The Met Police have confirmed 3 individuals were arrested on Wednesday by counter-terrorism police on suspicion of assisting a foreign intelligence service. Detectives from counter-terrorism policing in London, which is leading the investigation, arrested a 39-year-old man in London, a 68-year-old man in Powys in Wales, and a 43-year-old man in Pontyclun in Wales. Previous cases of alleged spying within Parliament have caused deep concern in Westminster, prompting warnings of a serious systemic challenge to British democracy. Now, I have said for a long time, the cobweb of links between the Labour Party and the CCP, we've seen accusations of spying with political aids for Labour MPs before. We have seen multiple ministers go out to glad hand people in the CCP. We have seen Starmer himself go out for a cosy with President Xi Jinping. We have seen what has gone on with the Chagos Islands. Now, the partner of a sitting Labour MP among 3 people arrested on suspicion of spying for China. My goodness.
I'm not surprised. And counter-terror police are the element of the police that will deal with national security issues. So they get involved in there. And of course, we remember Barry Gardner, who was influenced by someone who MI5 decided to out publicly. She's never been charged. There's never been criminal prosecutions brought in. But her son was in Barry Gardner's outer office. China is putting an awful lot of effort into getting into Parliament and into our parliamentary MPs to try and influence them. Of course, we've got the big decisions like the Chinese embassy.
The embassy, yes.
And everything else that's in there.
Exactly.
And the Chagos and everything. So what China wants to do is try and get in a place where they can find out the discussions that are going on behind closed doors to try and influence those elsewhere. And then we've got the links from all of these different legal lawyers that seem to be influencing things that are helping the government try and make geopolitical decisions with regard to Chagos and other deals around the world. And we don't know what links there are in there. We know Mauritius has got very close links into China, and we know that China has been complaining about the delays in the Chagos Island deal and everything else. There's so many links in here. It is so complex. It's very, very dangerous, and our sovereignty, our democracy is being undermined at every stage.
Complex, but at the same time, I think we can be confident that when it comes to the security services saying to the Labour government, mega embassy, Chagos Islands, they're not listening. And you wonder who they're serving, the UK people or the Chinese government.
Exactly.
Let's take a short break, gather ourselves, then after it, let's talk together, shall we, for some communal catharsis, a bit of group therapy. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call, or send me a WhatsApp 87222 if you're going to text. Right, talk before your message. We're back very soon.
The Green Party have won the Denton and Gorton by-election. Labour in third place.
Breaking news that Peter Mandelson has now been arrested. So Mandy and Andy have now both had their collars felt.
What would Andrew Loney tell them to do?
To come clean, be honest. And if Charles is complicit in this cover-up, which I believe he is, then I think he has to fall on his sword.
When you define sex, or gender or sex, what you mean is biological sex, and that's a man or woman, what you are physically, not what you think you are on a Wednesday afternoon.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I feel out of breath today. It's been one of those shows where it doesn't rain, but it pours, news-wise. Anyway, my head is like a sort of computer with 85 tabs open. I don't quite know where my brain is at. We're entering some sort of hugely escalating conflict in the Middle East. We've got the partner of a sitting Labour MP arrested for being a Chinese spy. The Green Party winning in Gorton and Denton, putting out campaign materials in Urdu, talking about genocide. What on earth is going on? Let's see if Carl in Liverpool can help us. Hello, Carl.
Hello, Alex. You okay?
I'm fine, mate. This is my job. I'm all right. Are you okay?
I'm all right, thank you. Yeah, so I obviously with what's going on, I just found it quite funny that France is going to the aid of Britain into another country when we can't stop dinghies from leaving their shores. You know, I just find it absolutely hysterical that that's happening and that we can't get a ship for a week to get there, but the French can come to help us but can't stop dinghies entering our waters.
Don't be mistaken, the French have come to defend our RAF base. They have not. They've gone because Cyprus has said, come and help.
Yeah. And then on the other hand, then you've got Keir Starmer meeting with the Muslim community last night and, you know, putting them the face of Britain and stuff. So you just think this man has completely lost the plot. And, you know, I just flabbergasted me, the whole thing.
But this has been going on a long time, the open borders, that calling everybody refugees welcome when clearly we're being infiltrated by a fifth column from hostile nations. And they all sort of shower themselves in moral rectitude when it comes to welcoming in Islamists and then not deporting people. And then when it comes to the one man who's going to stand up against a terrorist regime, they're trying to stop him.
Yeah, I think I mean, this is my take on it. With Donald Trump doing what he's doing alongside Israel, I think what he's showing is the ineptitude of all these other leaders of all these other European countries and worldwide, because he's showing them that it can be done. And all these career politicians who have undernard over the last decade or so and have just thought, well, we don't need to do it. We can talk a lot of platitudes and we polish our halos, but we won't actually do anything. And now Donald Trump's coming because he only knows he's going to get this one term, and he's smashed everything up. And he said, I'm going to continue to do what's right for my country and my people and the world. We need this to happen, but it's taken so long, and for one man to think, I will do this, and he's doing it. And you're always going to get the left, Alex, that will moan. But what they don't see is that the majority of us worldwide, the majority of us common sense thinking people, we want this to happen. We want our...
Oh, no. The Green Party councillor said, no, nobody wants this to happen. Of course, he knows. Carl, it's always lovely speaking to you. Thank you so much for calling us today. Let's speak to Peter in Dorset. Hi, Peter.
Hello there, good afternoon. I'll say this in the most complimentary way, that your presentation is an unbelievable entertainment, and it's a joy to listen to you every day. Apart from the niceties, there's no way that Donald Trump is somebody who is happy about the fact that we're sending a warship over to Iran just in time to have scones and clotted cream when the proceedings in Iran will probably be nearly over. That's the first thing. The second thing is, what on earth must it be doing to the morale of the forces in this country when they are being told to get on a boat for a joyride over to Iran when everybody else is busy fighting? What on earth must they wonder why they're in the forces for? That's the second thing. The third thing is that the situation that the previous governments and Keir Starmer, but now worse Keir Starmer, is the neglect of the armed forces. And when Donald Trump turns around and starts saying that we need 5% spent on defence, that's the minimum we should be spending on defence because of the neglect that they've been given. And now look at the state of us. We can hardly repair the ships that we've got. We've got not enough people to, even in the army itself, we've got it's unbelievable what...
Peter, I mean, you have sort of given me the inventory of horror that, sadly, I agree with every single point. We're in a tricky situation, to put it mildly. Big question, I think, is what are we going to do about it? And having watched PMQs, I don't think he's got a plan. Thank you for your call. Hello, Ian.
Hello. Good afternoon.
I tell you what.
God, tell me what.
It's one of those days today. There's news coming out of all corners.
I know.
It's like playing swing ball.
I think the swing... Did you ever like swing? Swing ball's one of those things.
Swing ball's great.
Swing ball's like jet washing a path. It's a great idea for the first 10 seconds. It's very sort of nice, satisfying moment.
It was actually quite a violent game as a kid. I think I got a few black
whacked
eyes
in the chops with that thing. Pretty dangerous stuff. Who would best lead Britain in a war? I'm picking up on the back of the Trump comment, which, by the way, is the single most powerful thing I've ever heard.